hearing that ran long until about 7 minutes ago. So I'm going to test how long I can continuously do these. Yeah. Okay. So without further ado, are we ready? Sorry, I should check in. Are we streaming? Are we good?
Ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Carrie. All right. I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means for the Council. This hearing is being recorded and live streamed. It's at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It's also broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. The Council's budget review process encompasses about 35 hearings and working sessions. So it's quite extensive. One second, I think I'm just getting, there we go, got some feedback. You know, we really encourage residents to get involved and come testify. So this is the hearing about DND, the Department of Neighborhood Development, and the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. If you want to testify at this, you can shoot us an email at ccc.wm@boston.gov or go to boston.gov/budget-testify to find out how. You can also see the whole calendar at boston.gov/council-budget. There's a way to upload a video of yourself for a future hearing. You can send us an email again at ccc.wm@boston.gov. You can always tweet at us at #BossBudget, BOSBudget. And then we're having 2 dedicated public testimony hearings. So if you're watching this later and evenings are more convenient for you, you can come May 25th at 6 p.m. and testify focused on BPS's budget, or you can come June 3rd at 6 p.m. and testify on any aspect of the budget. So we'd love to hear from you then. Today's hearing, in a formal sense, is on docket 0524 to 0526, orders for the FY21 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits. Docket 0527 to 0528, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations, and docket 0529 to 0531, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. But as mentioned before, our focus areas will be the Department of Neighborhood Development and the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. And I'm grateful to be joined by my colleagues, Councillor Ed Flynn of District 2, Councillor Andrea Campbell, District 4, Councillor Liz Braden, District 9, Councillor Lydia Edwards, District 1, Councillor Anissa Asabi George, at large, and I believe that's our list for now. Yes. And Councillor Julia Mejia, at large, has just arrived as well. So I think without further ado, I want to pass it over to Chief Dillon. Obviously, we're joined here today by an extensive team from the Department of Neighborhood Development, and like I said, also the Office of Fair Housing and Equity, but I'll allow them to introduce themselves. So Chief Dillon.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Councillor Bach and members of the Ways and Means Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding our fiscal year 22 budget. For the record, my name is Sheila Dillon, and I'm Chief of Housing for the City of Boston and also the Director of the Department of Neighborhood Development. Testifying with me today is Rick Wilson, Deputy Director for Administration and Finance, Donald Wright, Deputy Director for Real Estate Management and Sales, and as mentioned, we have a number of senior managers at DND that are here to answer any and all questions you may have. So if it's all right with you, we've got a brief presentation on accomplishments in fiscal year 21 and some of the high level proposals for 22. So as many of you know, DND's work cuts across 5 strategic areas: creating and preserving affordable housing, ending homelessness, strengthening homeownership, supporting renters, and managing and disposing of city-owned property. Before turning it over to Rick, as I mentioned, we're just going to give a quick highlight of fiscal year 21 and what's proposed for 22. So I'd like to start with housing, affordable housing development. Over the past year, despite the pandemic, we've had a tremendous success creating affordable housing opportunities with over 1,000 affordable units being permitted so far this year. 768 were funded by DND. The other units were created through the IDP program. One area we focused on is building supportive housing for our seniors. We hear over and over and over again how important that is. And so we're working very hard on increasing the pipeline. So 262 units is not enough, but it's more than we've had in previous years. So I'm pleased with that. One example is Hearth at Four Corners, and the picture of that is on the screen. It is almost completed, and they're starting to get ready to rent up. Every year, too, we issue our housing development funding round. And just a few months ago, because we always want to increase pipeline, we announced $34 million in awards from our fiscal year 21 round, which will create or preserve 841 units across 15 developments, really across almost every neighborhood in the city. We're also working hard to maintain the city's stock of income restricted housing. So this year, we preserved over 1,000 affordable units. And to prevent displacement, we've continued to support the acquisition program that converts market rate housing where people are at risk upon turnover and convert them to deed restricted units. And so far this year, 313 units have been acquired, including the largest AOP project to date, Morton Village in Mattapan, with 207 units. And finally, we're thrilled to work with the BHA to launch the city-funded voucher program, which has an RFP out now, and they're getting very, very close to issuing some tenant-based vouchers as well. Looking ahead to 22, we're going to continue to support the preservation and creation of affordable housing by closing on over 1,300 new units of housing in fiscal year 22. That's what our pipeline is telling us we can do. And once again, we're going to issue our annual funding round in July with an estimated $30 million available from city funding, HUD grants, IDP, CPA, and linkage funds. And I want to thank the City Council for your support on many of the projects coming in. You often give support letters, have worked through the community process, et cetera. So thank you for that. We're going to double down on acquisitions to preserve tenancies and affordability, and are actively seeking opportunities to leverage federal COVID funding for the acquisition of supportive housing projects. We're going to continue to recruit and support MWBE development partners through the Development Opportunity Fund, which provides pre-development financing to small, local, and MWBE developers. And if this budget passes, we will implement the $1 million budget investment that will support the development of affordable commercial space and DND funded mixed-use projects, so these spaces will be accessible to local businesses, MWBEs, and community organizations. Next slide. Okay, homeless and supportive housing. So COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of this work and our work to end homelessness in Boston. Since the start of the pandemic, we have helped house 1,183 homeless individuals, including chronically homeless veterans and youth that we worked with our partners to quickly stand up auxiliary sites to de-densify shelters. We've also created new units of housing for homeless households, and we have a very robust pipeline of just shy of 500 units that will be completed over the next several years. We've also supported the BHA's effort to house 1,000 low-income Boston public housing families. So we're working with a lot of nonprofits as those families find locations to rent and get the supports they need as they move in. In fiscal year 22, we'll continue to maximize federal COVID relief funding to provide more than 800 supportive housing opportunities to homeless households. We will also be updating, creating, and implementing strategic plans to address homelessness among youth, adults, and families. And we have already begun to work on a plan to address the problem on our streets by getting consultants to work with a lot of the street outreach teams to make their work more impactful. Finally, we're extremely excited to be breaking ground on 2 very large permanent supportive housing projects for homeless individuals in the city. These are the largest supportive housing projects we've ever done in the city of Boston. One is located in JP at 3368 Washington Street, and the other one is located at 140 Clarendon Street in the Back Bay, and the pictures are on the screen. So a lot of very important work in homelessness this year. Slide 5 on home ownership. I think we've all recognized the importance of home ownership in addressing inequalities in housing and wealth in Boston. Over the past year, we've launched several new initiatives to expand access to home ownership. First, working very closely with MHP Fund, we launched the One Plus Boston First Time Homebuyer Program, which provides discounted mortgage rates and enhanced down payment assistance to eligible homebuyers. This program has been extremely successful to date. One of the best new programs we have ever launched, with 250 applications processed and 52 homes purchased. 70% of those purchases are by households of color. And then second, working with MAHA, the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, we established the First Generation Homebuyer Match Savings Program, which currently has 200 participants, 97% of whom are people of color. And that's working with the first generation home buyers in people's families. And third, we're expanding our efforts to promote cooperative ownership as a pathway to home ownership by providing training and education. And we are finalizing a pilot that will provide financial assistance for co-op home ownership. As we roll out these new initiatives, we continue to support home buyers and homeowners. Excuse me, we had 1,700 residents participate in our home buying education programs, and we completed more than 600 home repair projects and 80 senior safe heating systems this year under very, very, difficult and challenging conditions. We also provided 150 homeowners foreclosure prevention counseling, which has been such an important issue to watch, especially as folks have lost their jobs. In fiscal year 22, we'll launch yet another new initiative to address one of the main obstacles to home buying by providing education and financial incentives to low-income residents to improve their credit scores. And we'll expand the One Plus Boston Mortgage Program to more lenders. Of course, we'll continue to help seniors with heating and home repair projects, and we will support homeowners impacted by COVID-19 with foreclosure counseling and accessing mortgage relief. Next slide. Housing stability, another just critical area in this last year as we have dealt with the pandemic. It has been really one of our priorities and one of our largest areas of focus. When the pandemic hit, as you all know all too well, thousands of Boston residents found themselves out of work or their hours were reduced, greatly reduced. In response, working very closely with you, you had a lot to say about this program early on, and I really believe that your suggestions made it a better program. We established the Rental Relief Fund using federal grants and have awarded more than $10 million to date to assist 2,400 households. We've also worked with our nonprofit partners to help nearly 5,000 renters with eviction prevention services, legal assistance, and housing search over the past year. We've implemented virtual legal clinics and walk-in hours so that tenants could continue accessing the services they needed. And in the midst of all of this, we worked to pass the Housing Stabilization Notification Act and the Condo and Cooperative Conversion Ordinance. We want to thank the Council for your support for these important measures. Looking ahead, as the eviction moratorium and emergency declaration come to an end, we are concerned, most certainly, as you all are. And we're going to just redouble our efforts to support tenants with rental relief, for which we've set aside $50 million, mediation, and legal services. And to ensure that all sectors of our city are able to get the assistance they need, we'll be enlisting community-based organizations to raise awareness of the Rental Relief Fund and help renters complete applications. We have a lot of money to use for rental relief, as does the state, but it's only going to be as good as we can get the word out and make sure that every renter knows of the resource. We're going to continue to push critical legislation at the State House to prevent displacement, including, yes, once again, right to counsel in the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which did pass last year. Unfortunately, it was vetoed by the governor. But we're building stronger coalitions, and so hopefully that will have a better fate this year. Slide 7. I just want to talk very briefly about real estate management and disposition. That is always of great interest to the council. So in fiscal year 21, we continued to work with neighborhoods to dispose of surplus city land, selling or transferring over 100 parcels by the end of this fiscal year. And over the past 7 years, we've disposed of over 3 million square feet of real estate, the vast majority, supported the creation of affordable housing or open space like community gardens and urban agriculture. We are particularly proud to have released, working with Councilor Campbell and others, the Blue Hill Avenue B1 parcel RFP. And getting rid of all of the land on Blue Hill Avenue will help revitalize Blue Hill Avenue, but also we want to get our land back into productive use. Our grassroots program has really taken off in the last few years, creating 15 new gardens or farms. And this is just over the last 24 months. In fiscal year 22, overall, we expect to sell or transfer at least 95 parcels of land. Although as we continue to sell land, the parcels in our inventory are becoming more difficult to dispose of. They are, they've got ledge, they've got rocks, they're landlocked, et cetera. But we are committed to putting as much land as we can back into productive use. And you'll see on this chart that much of our land is not available or not suitable for any kind of development. 537 parcels are either in the Grove, urban wild. There's no interest, or they're currently in a redemption period. But we're laser focused on the 589 parcels that we do have. 250 of those are in active disposition, and 340 are in predisposition. Most of those have already been analyzed. So when we move the 240, those others will move up. So lots of folks doing a lot of great work on land disposition. Next slide. So I just want to take a quick minute to look back on the last year, what DND did to support the city's COVID response, and then look forward and then I will wrap up. So DND has been at the center of the city's housing response to COVID, ensuring that residents have access to safe shelter and/or stable housing. We've added temporary shelter beds and created supportive housing opportunities for homeless households. We helped stand up Boston Hope, the Boston Hope Respite at the convention center, where homeless individuals that were tested positive for COVID were able to go and be well. We established the Rental Relief Fund and educated renters about their rights in multiple languages. We provided PPE and cleaning support to multifamily properties. And when we were preparing last week for this, it seemed like so long ago that we were actually helping, congested housing sites or SRO sites, getting them masks and cleaning supplies, et cetera. But that's what was happening in the first several months. We completed wellness checks and responded to senior emergency housing calls, and we activated the Strand Theater to serve as a neighborhood COVID testing and vaccination site. I just want to take a minute. I could not be more proud or more thankful to the DND staff that were working at home with kids under tow and their own issues in the pandemic, but that really stepped up and continued to serve Bostonians. So I just want to take a minute to thank them. Moving forward, we are going to continue to, work very hard as we come out of this crisis. We're going to support homeless households, renters, homeowners, and leverage as much of the federal funds that we can and make very good use of them. I just want to talk a little bit about coming out of the pandemic and what we're going to do to support renters. I think we are, as I mentioned, we are all very concerned that when the protections come to an end. So we are going to receive notices to quit through the online portal and outreach to the tenants that are receiving those notices about the resources that we have to offer. And the staff at the OHS are also tracking all of the activity in our courts. And as soon as we get information on the courts, we are reaching out as soon as we get good information on trying to help them get back rent, future rent, and legal services. We have funded a lot of new legal capacity at GBLS and are working with many nonprofits on getting the rental relief funding out. So we are concerned, and it's going to be remain a focus of ours in the upcoming year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick. And sorry, I talked a lot, but there really has been a lot accomplished and a lot to look forward in the next year. Rick's going to outline our budget and provide a brief summary of the external funds. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Great, thanks, Sheila. Good afternoon, councilors. For the record, my name is Rick Wilson. I'm Deputy Director of Administration and Finance at DND. And as Sheila said, I'll go through our recommended budget. As you can see from the slide, our FY22 recommended budget is recommended operating budget, including the Housing 2030 special appropriation, is $35.3 million. That's a $6.2 million increase, or 21% over FY21. We're really thankful for this additional funding that the mayor and the budget office have recommended. That's really made up of almost entirely 3 new investments. The first is $2.5 million in increased funding for the City of Boston voucher program that Sheila mentioned earlier, bringing the total funding for that program to $5 million on an annual basis. That program was just launched in January through an MOA between DND and the Boston Housing Authority. And as Sheila said, I think they're actively making awards as we speak. The second investment is $2.5 million for post-COVID homeless initiatives. This funding will support the federal funding that we've received. We'll use it for activities that may not be eligible for federal funding, such as extending rapid rehousing benefits, which is rental assistance plus supportive services for homeless individuals, and to expand our homeless peer navigator program. That's a program that we launched a few years ago where we have formerly homeless individuals through our provider partners. They're hired to outreach and connect currently homeless individuals with housing and services, and that's been a successful effort, and we want to expand that. And the last investment is $1 million. Again, Sheila mentioned this earlier, to subsidize the development of affordable commercial space in DND funded projects. This is an activity there's not a lot of subsidy financing out there for this activity. And we want to put this funding in place so that developers can turn around and offer that space and make it affordable to small businesses, MWBEs, nonprofits. So we think this is a really great investment, and we're looking forward to implementing it. And that's really it for the operating budget. Those are the major changes, not much else going on. I'll talk for a second about the capital budget. These are the two new projects in FY22 capital budget. These are really BHA projects, but they show up in the housing cabinet, so we thought we'd mention them. The first is $5 million for upgrades at the elderly and disabled public housing sites listed here at various BHA communities. And the second is $19 million for phase 3 of the Orient Heights BHA development in East Boston. And if you have questions about those, we're happy to take them back and get answers to you from the BHA. We'll quickly talk about our external funds budget. As you know, most of DND's funding, the vast majority, comes from external sources, not from city operating, but from external sources, primarily HUD grants. Most of the sources listed here are our annual grants from HUD. But for FY22, the biggest source of spending is actually going to be the COVID-19 relief funding that we received through HUD and through the U.S. Treasury Department, estimated at $44 million for FY22. And as we've presented to you in all of our accept and expend hearings over the past year, we're primarily using this funding for rental relief and for our homelessness programs. The remaining HUD grants on here, there's not really significant changes to report. The Continuum of Care program, we did get our biggest COC award once again, and we're estimated to spend about $40 million on that. That funds our homelessness and supportive housing programs. And we were excited that HUD has now rolled our youth and young adult homelessness funding into that program, so we can apply for that on a renewal basis every year. And the other source on here is the Inclusionary Development program. You all know what that is. We use that to fund our housing development, as well as our acquisition opportunity program. And that's become a really critical source. Collections continue to be strong. We're continuing to benefit from the strong housing market going into COVID. And we expect that to continue for the next few years, although of course we'll be monitoring it closely, working with the BPDA. But we expect to spend about $20 million of IDP funding in FY22. I wanted to mention some other city sources. These aren't technically in our budget, but they've become really critical for our programs. So I thought it was worth mentioning, and we really appreciate the City Council and the Community Preservation Commission and the Neighborhood Housing Trust, your support for our programs. CPA has been in place now for a few years, and it's been a huge, important source for us. $14.6 million awarded in the current year for housing and community garden open space projects. $5 million. The CPA has funded our acquisition opportunity program over the past few years, as well as our One Plus Boston mortgage program that Sheila described earlier. The Neighborhood Housing Trust, or linkage, $16.1 million awarded in the current fiscal year to create or preserve 853 units across 10 developments. Some of the ones that Sheila mentioned earlier, Morton Village and 140 Clarendon Street. And we project $13.5 million in revenue from NHT in FY22. So, and I think that's it for the budget, and I'll turn it over to Donald to talk about our work in diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors, and for the record, my name is Donald Wright. I'm the Deputy Director of Real Estate Management and Sales. I'll be highlighting you on our diversity, equity, and inclusion programming here at DND. We'll start with equitable procurement. 92% of DND's contractual services funding goes to nonprofits. Of the 53 contracts for-profit, 38% are MWBs, but only 9% are certified. We partner with the Office of Economic Development, the Office of Equity and Inclusion to recruit new MBEs and WBEs, as well as help with certifying those vendors. We conduct significant outreach to MWBEs and provide technical assistance in responding to procurement opportunities. And I'd like to make note that all RFPs require diversity and inclusion, a diversity and inclusion plan. And on the internal side, our racial equity working group has secured an external partner to examine DND's organization, policies, and programs to foster racial equity in the workplace and build the tools, infrastructure that will do the same in the communities we serve. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sheila.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Rick. And that concludes our presentation. We're standing by to answer any questions you may have. And I just want to say for the record, I do appreciate, we all do appreciate the partnership that we've had with the council over the last year as we've worked in very trying and collectively worked on a very trying environment. But thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Dillon. And we appreciate you all so much. Before we go to questions, I think it makes the most sense to have fair housing and equity present. And then that way councilors can direct questions in all directions. So Will, if you want to take it away. You're muted, just so.
Good afternoon, councilors. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here. Will Onoha, I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. And while we do not have a presentation, DND definitely showed us up. We do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I am happy to report that the Office of Fair Housing and Equity has had a very productive year this year. One of the things that we have been very productive in doing is working very closely with DND, to name a specific person, Tim Davis specifically, in writing what is called the, or redrafting what is the AFH, which is the assessment tool that cities and towns are supposed to, or were supposed to complete under the Obama regs. And Boston was able to continue it, even though the last administration didn't want us to. We were able to do that and get it completed. And at this point, it is on Mayor Janey's desk being reviewed, both in executive summary and the actual executive order that will give rise to Boston's assessment of fair housing. So that was one of the major accomplishments we were able to get done in FY21. Also, we were able to do a number of discrimination cases. This year, we received the highest award from HUD of $325,000 from HUD for the number of cases that the Office of Fair Housing and Equity closed, which is the highest award we've received within the last 5 years. So kudos to my staff for all the work, all the investigators that have took on all the housing discrimination cases. And as you all know, we also, one of the biggest things we did this year, which I'm sure the councilors are gonna have questions on, which we're ready to answer, is we worked, as you know, last year there was a study that came out regarding housing discrimination in the city of Boston, and the Office of Housing and Equity took on that study. This was a study that showed that there was great discrimination going on, both with housing and against both race and voucher discrimination. This year, with the $250,000 that was given to the Office of Fair Housing and Equity from the Boston Police Overtime Budget Fund, we were able to contract Suffolk University to do the testing for us. Suffolk has a testing program, which I cannot get into the result of it because this is still an ongoing investigation, but we have been able to get a lot of traction on housing discrimination all across the city of Boston based on race and voucher discrimination, which we're happy to talk about. So I think I'm going to just stop there because I'm sure a lot of your questions are going to get into that, and we will be glad and able to answer any of those questions.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Will. And we've had wide variation. I would like to commend DND for both doing a presentation and not taking an hour with it. So it was a lot of information effectively presented. I think you guys might win the prize. But Will, you're far from alone in giving a brief pressy at the start, and then we'll be jumping in with our questions anyway, as you say. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into the order as usual. I will reserve my questions to the end. So I'm going to go first to Councillor Ed Flynn, and then it'll be Councillor Campbell, Councillor Braden, Edwards, Asabi George, Mejia, and Baker. And I neglected to say that Councillor Frank Baker joined us some time ago. I do think, Will, that we're getting feedback from your machines. So if you don't mind muting just when you're not, unfortunately, I think, it's hard to figure out the Zoom gods even a year in, but I think great. All right, so going to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you to Sheila and the DND team for doing outstanding work, especially during the last year, during this pandemic, providing so much critical assistance need to families that were struggling. So I want to say thank you to Sheila's team. Also want to say thank you to Will for the important work Will is doing as well. So I think my first question to Sheila, developments that are 9 units or over that are required to have an affordable unit. Are we seeing any issues at all about developers trying to manipulate the system and not providing the extra unit or not doing it at all? We saw a couple cases several years ago in South Boston, but I know you agree with me, Sheila. We have zero tolerance for anyone that tries to play games like that. But just want to know, have we seen anything recently on that issue?
That's a very good question. So it's 10 units, Councillor, and I just want to thank Councillor Edwards and Bach for having a hearing on inclusionary development. And we heard that we should be looking at a lower threshold, and we are talking about that internally, and we'll have something maybe to discuss soon with you. I am not aware of any projects right now, but I do want to double check with the BPDA so that where we are chasing affordable units against an obligation. I'm not aware of any right now, and usually I'm aware of them if that's happening, but I do want to double check. So I'll get back to you when we get back to the council at large and let you know if there is any.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. I think that's an important issue. We just want to make sure that we follow up on the enforcement of anyone that's trying to violate that. My second question is, Sheila, And I know you've been very responsive and working with me on trying to get as much affordable housing as we can in Chinatown. Sheila, with all the development taking place in and around Chinatown, what are we doing, or how are we doing going forward to make sure that the affordable housing units stay in the community, stay in Chinatown, stay in this proud immigrant community? That's my top priority in Chinatown, is making sure it's a neighborhood that's welcoming to our immigrant community, that's welcoming to certainly the Asian community and low-income residents as well. What are we doing there?
As you know, I share that with you. Chinatown is unique in that the development pressures that are where it's located, there's such development pressures that, in my opinion, the only way that we're going to preserve Chinatown as a neighborhood is if we continue to grow the affordable housing and small businesses. So we all, despite that though, and I think because of your help and some very good nonprofits, we do usually have a very healthy pipeline of affordable housing projects, which we underwrite quickly and try to prioritize. And I can think of 5 or 6 right now, very large affordable housing developments in Chinatown. So I think it's going to be a combination of moving those forward to keep the percentage of deed restricted affordable units high, while at the same time being very careful and mindful, and I'm not speaking for the BPDA right now, but being mindful of the development that is in the market rate development that is in Chinatown, surrounds Chinatown, because I think it's all about balance. We really need to have, a good balance of affordable housing going forward. And if it becomes very market driven, I think we will lose the character of that neighborhood. So I think, collectively, we just got to, lobby for these projects to go forward, and associated small commercial space and support to our small businesses. And, certainly using yourself and others, our electeds, to make sure that these projects get priority at the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila.
I will send over, though, the projects that we are working on in Chinatown, the pipeline, just so you have it and you'll know where to weigh in.
Yeah, that would be helpful, Sheila. I'd be interested in getting that. We work together on a lot of issues, including small businesses that are owned by women, communities of color in Chinatown. Just with the pandemic now being over and the economy moving forward somewhat, prices are going up. What type of assistance are we able to provide women-owned or Asian-owned and immigrant-owned companies in Chinatown that we want to keep them there and not have someone push them out because someone else has more money to bring in another business?
I'm good. I know that the Office of Economic Development is working with many of the Chinatown businesses, so I will defer to them, but I will have Midori reach out to you, because I know there's a lot of work going on right now in Chinatown. They've been particularly hard hit in the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. And again, your team has been excellent during the pandemic and helping so many people, not just in my district, but across the city. So I want to say thank you to the DND team. Hey, Will, how you doing, Will?
Good, Counselor. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for the work you're doing, Will. Will, in your capacity, in your leadership role, are you seeing any discrimination taking place in housing as it relates to our immigrant neighbors? I know there's an ongoing study, but what type of impact has COVID-19 had on discrimination against immigrant residents that want to go into housing? Are we seeing any type of uptick of discrimination towards them?
Yes, Counselor, we're definitely seeing a lot of discrimination towards immigrants, but our focus has been, as you know, on either race and voucher discrimination. And of course, immigrants definitely fall into race. So without going too much into the investigation, because it's ongoing, we've been able to test a number of landlords, real estate brokers, development buildings all throughout the city of Boston, just about every neighborhood, and we're still testing. And one of the things that we will do in September, when our first round of testing is done, we are going to provide, just to be clear, we're going to provide the city council with a report, a full drafted report on our findings, broken down by council districts. So you'll see which neighborhoods, you'll see the buildings, you'll see what we are even going to list the bad actors, if you will. It's also important for you to know that we're also doing this in conjunction with the Attorney General's office. For bigger landlords or bigger real estate folks, they will be prosecuting. We're turning those over to the Attorney General's office for prosecutorial action, while our agency goes after them through the means that are given to us for enforcement.
That's good to hear. Will, as you know, it's been a difficult year for everybody, including or especially the Asian community. You know, if an Asian resident has a voucher for housing, and, you know, many people racistly, you know, associated them with COVID-19, but if they had a Section 8 housing voucher, you know, I'm sure those numbers would be going up in terms of the discrimination towards Asians. Are we looking also at that issue and what impact maybe the pandemic has played on the increase of discrimination towards the Asian community also?
Yes, absolutely. The Asian community is one of our major focuses. As you know, Councillor, we know that the AAPI community has been affected by COVID-19 in so many different ways, particularly in discrimination has gone up against the AAPI community. So the short answer to your question is yes. And some of our testers definitely revolve around the Asian American or Pacific Islander community.
So will you also—
Or testing, sorry.
After this is over, after that study is over or investigations are over, but are you having recommendations on how the city of Boston is able to better deal with helping people not be a victim of discrimination? Are you coming out with recommendations as well?
Not only will we have recommendations, we're also seeking enforcement. And by enforcement, we are bringing in the bad actors before the Boston Fair Housing Commission, and basically prosecute them before the Boston Fair Housing Commission. They're going to be given sanctions. They're going to be given civil penalties, damages, compensatory damages, that kind of a thing. So we're seeking serious enforcement. And on top of that, there's an educational component, which we will also recommend that they do, that we do the teaching. We would recommend them to classes where they have to take classes as part of settlement agreements to receive discriminatory training or fair housing training, as you call it.
Okay, no, that's good, Will. That's good information to know. I'll continue working with you on that. I have great respect for the role your team plays in the city. It's critical. I probably think we need to see about increasing the budget. You guys play a critical role in Boston, but you know, having more investigators investigating these outrageous discrimination related issues is important. But having said that, I just want to say thank you to Sheila, say thank you to Will and all the people that are on this call for the important work that you guys are doing. Thank you, Councilor Buck.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Sheila and all her team for the great work that they do, and especially for your support on 6 Quint Ave project in Alston. it's going to be a very important piece of the puzzle in providing housing, affordable housing for some of our most vulnerable residents. I had a few questions. In terms of, there's a project, and I think I raised this earlier, but I'm not getting any satisfaction. We had, and it predates my tenure. 1047 Commonwealth Ave is a building with SROs. The owner has been leasing the building to BU and Suffolk University, and the community has never had access to the 26 IDP units that were part of the deal when the building was built. So I don't really know what recourse we have to try and ensure that those units come online as IDP units. I see that the building is being leased at market rate for the fall. And I just want to know if we have any recourse in that. It's a significant loss to lose 26 units and over a period of 3 years now. So anything we can do to redress that situation. Also, in terms of, I think that's really the biggest issue that I had to ask you about. Also, in terms of the funding for the improvements of the BHA properties, including Patricia White, what is the scope of that? Of those improvements, and what is the timeline, and will anyone be displaced from the building? Thank you.
So, I'm aware of 1047 Com Ave, and I haven't thought about it in a while, and I appreciate bringing it to our attention. My crude understanding is that BU was no longer leasing it, or was not going to lease it, right? They were using it as swing space. So if that is the case, Councillor, then those units, the 26 affordable IDP units, should have been absolutely, should have done a marketing plan and all of that. And I don't have an update, but let me check on that. And with the BPDA and Alexis, and we'll get back to you on that ASAP. I'm curious too now. The other question was about public housing, and I don't know if Rick or anyone else, I know you're talking to the BHA about some of the funding before we came to the hearing, but we may have to get that from the BHA. Rick?
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't get an update on that one from the BHA, so we can reach out to them and provide that to you.
No trouble. And I'm also very pleased to hear that, that we're considering support for affordable rental. We're seeing a lot of our small businesses being displaced in the space of a huge wave of new development, and a lot of the new retail space is being really marketed to chains and not really targeted at our small local businesses. So I'm glad to hear that that's part of our initiative, and I hope that we can look at those issues out in Alston, Brighton, as well as in other parts of the city. And I think that's all I have for now, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Braden. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you, of course, to Chief Dillon, to you and your team. You make yourself available along with your team at all hours to get things done. And particularly during COVID, it was a very difficult time. So I can't stress my gratitude enough, and my team's gratitude to your entire team for keeping people housed. I was calling you early in the morning when someone was getting evicted and thrown out, along with everyone else on your team. So thank you guys so much. A few questions. I'll ask them, I guess, all at once, and then you can answer before the gavel goes up by Councillor Bach. The first is Shawnee's work around the grassroots program. We have heard a lot of great feedback on that, and it's clearly in high demand in the district. I'm sure in other parts of the city too. Just more detail on increasing funding to make this help programs sort of advance more quickly. We've been getting a lot of requests there. The second piece, of course, is a shout out to the Office of Housing Stability and Katie Ford is directly in front of me on the screen. So hello. And Taylor too, you guys are like right here in front of me. So, but thank you guys for the work you're doing. And specifically the Office of Housing Stability, we were sending a lot of requests and we still do. So how does this budget specifically support more residents in terms of rental assistance, which of course helps landlords too? And how does it help sort of help folks navigate the resources in helping tenants and landlords find positive outcomes? Because we're getting a lot of questions on that, particularly given new federal investments to the city. Another question I have, activating vacant lots. So thank you and your team for the work there. Donald, so many, just your whole team. Thank you guys. I can't stress this enough. But on the vacant lots work, really appreciate the shout out on Blue Hill Ave. You know, we're continuing to stay in touch there. But 1-year lease options seem to be a great way to activate vacant lots as soon as possible, especially for public art. So what is DND doing to be able to provide these opportunities to folks? And then my last question, because I'm sure I will see the gavel, is it actually is from a previous hearing that was best to bring it here. It was around the senior home repair program. Clearly a critical program to keep our seniors from being displaced, been addressing issues, and we all have to make it the best program possible, no concerns, keeping contractors accountable, of course. But a lot of questions from our seniors with respect to that program. So how are we expanding support and funding for it, and just the accountability piece to ensure that the quality of work is at the highest standards for all of us? Thank you.
So I'll start, but I'll probably have to, hand it over to some folks. So I agree. Shawnee's work is sublime. I mean, she's just like every disposition meeting, every meeting with the public facilities, there's a new garden, a new food forest. I didn't know what a food forest was when I started this, a new farm, et cetera. So we could always, I think Shawnee could always use another Shawnee. But we've been a little hesitant in the COVID budget to ask for additional staff, but if the city council sees fit to push for that, Shawnee's been fabulous, but we are looking to see how we can support her work and get her some supports internally.
That's good to know. So thank you for that.
I think I'll defer to Taylor or Katie Ford about getting the word out. I agree, especially with small landlords. Like I said earlier, our response to COVID and people needing help with rent, we've got the resources. Now it's all about messaging and getting the word out. So I don't know if Taylor or Katie have anything you really want to outline there. I'm handing Taylor, Katie, unmute.
Yeah, I'm gonna give things over to Katie Ford to talk about OHS in terms of the many ways in which they're really trying to work with tenants and landlords to get this assistance out.
Yep, great, thank you so much. So we work with Volunteer Lawyer Project, which helps landlords as far as getting assistance legally. So we have a clinic every Tuesday evening with landlords and tenants, getting them legal assistance. Anyone who calls our hotline gets a lawyer. So when they're in court, they receive assistance, which is great, which has really helped keep the evictions down. Right now, there's been 1,400 evictions filed in the city of Boston and a little over 100 executions issued. So actually 113 people ordered to leave their homes. So that's about 1%, which we're, we don't want those 113 people to leave their homes, but we want to make sure to just recognize those numbers and all the hard work that's going on at OHS, because statewide over 2,000 people have been ordered to leave their home, but in the city of Boston, 113. So we're really proud of those numbers because of the hard work of our staff. And that's because we've also been working with landlords. We've made sure that they understand the assistance that's available to them and what it means when they accept our funding and when they accept the state funding. It's really important that they understand that these resources are available and to be patient and accept the funding, especially with the state of emergency being lifted shortly, which was unexpected. And so we are continuing to work with those landlords, because if they don't accept the money, they're not going to get it, and people will not stay housed. And the number one thing that we want to make sure that landlords are doing too, and that people understand, is that when landlords do not accept the money, we now have in our rental relief program that we will pay tenants directly and that they will sign off. They will promise us that they will pay that money to their landlord. And that's been really helpful as well. So another way that we also get the information out is through city councilors like you, all of the city councilors on the call. All the councilors have been so helpful to our office getting information out to landlords. We've had just different meetings with people. I know that you all know landlords who are willing to accept tenants when we give them this funding, when we say, hey, we have $15,000 we can give a tenant. And then, every counselor's office has picked up the ball and run with it and said, you know what, we know a landlord in our district who needs a tenant. And so that's been really helpful. So continuing to get the word out that way, but also just by advertising, whatever we can do to think of to get the word out. We are trying. I think we're teaming up with the state now. There's going to be advertisements at the train stations. So we're piggybacking off of their advertisements. We really, or any language barriers that people may have, we're trying to get the word out that way. But small landlords are the ones that we want to help. The state has a program for subsidized landlords, so they're in good shape. And it's the small landlords that we want to know about this program. And they're the ones who've been patient throughout this time. They're the ones who have not been filing the eviction complaints, and they're the ones that we want to reward with this money first. So thank you for the comments, and
thank you.
Pass it on. I don't remember what your last question was. But
I think if I could, just on the senior home repair, because it's so important, I'd like to have Maureen just address that. And I know she's been working very closely with your office, counselors.
Yes, thank you so much, Maureen.
Hi, Councilor Campbell. Yes, so that great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Just to frame it a little bit, during COVID, we didn't go into seniors' homes because of obviously the situation, but we still were able to and did answer over 150 311 requests for help, emergency requests for help from seniors, and did 80 seniors save programs, so replacing heating systems because they weren't working or they were about to fail. And we just, went into the basement without the senior being physically close. So we have continued to work with seniors over COVID and answered many of their emergency calls. To your point around contractor quality of work, that's one of our main concerns as well. Every homeowner who does a project with us, including seniors, gets a survey from us at the end of the project to ask them how it went, what problems or issues that they had, and to see how they liked working with the program. And so they return those surveys to us, and we share those with the contractors if there's an issue, and we follow up right away. We did mention in the hearing that we had before with you and other counselors that because of the funding source and the way that senior projects are funded, they are the most complicated projects. They're the most involved. And so they tend to take longer and they're more complicated than the non-senior projects. So we want to make sure that the contractors that our seniors are getting are, of course, good quality. So we follow up and address any issues with the contractors. We have them go back and correct anything that is not up to our standards or not up to the homeowners. So we're trying to do that. And I think part of the making sure that this is addressed is that we have instituted the every other week call with your staff and with the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council to make sure that if we hear of a problem, if you hear of a problem, or anybody hears of a problem, that we nip it in the bud, that we take care of it right away. And so far, we've been exchanging information, even not about senior home repair projects, just about foreclosure issues or whatever. So it's been really helpful to have those meetings. I think we were on our third one last week. So.
Thank you. And we can continue the one-year option piece. Chief Dillon, I see the gavel waving, but I have to thank, Will, I see Andrew, Will, Rick, Marcy, Jessica. I mean, your whole team really, it's been a tough year to say the least. And you guys were on the front lines in many ways without probably a lot of resources and human capital. So thank you all so much. And I can save my questions for the next round. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Great, thank you, Councilor Campbell. Next up is going to be Councilor Edwards, then Councilor Sabi George. We were also joined by Councilor Frank Baker of District 3 a while back, and Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, District 5, Councilor Michael Flaherty at large. Counselor Edwards.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just confirming. I've had technical difficulties all day. First of all, I mean, I would normally just go through and name everybody who's been so great from your departments, but I've been one of the few city councilors who's been great, been blessed to work with you as a colleague, and then also now to work with you as a counselor. So I just want to thank all of DND, honestly, for your efforts, your work, and your dedication. I know what you have had to do in the last year, and doing it from your homes, trying to balance your own lives and your own kids, doing all of that. I just want to say thank you. And the love and the appreciation also goes out to you, Will. I know that you had to work a great deal as well. I just to my these are my former homies from DND, so I do have a certain bias. Can't help it. But I do want to just follow up then. My questions are more update questions, and then and where we're going. I really appreciate you, Sheila, really dedicating kind of what 2022 looks like. But before we go there, I do want to know what, during the State of the City 2019, maybe no, it's 2020, Mayor Walsh at the time said that the city was going to have $500 million dedicated to housing. I don't even know if that number is relevant anymore. It would be great to know what the new number is. I know we have federal infrastructure and federal investment in levels that we never did before. We unfortunately did not get the transfer fee done. We do have, I don't know if we're selling the garage to pay for. And I do know that the $100 million though, I think that included BHA, Bunker Hill, and other bonding is moving along. So if that's one big bucket, if someone can tell me what we're doing with our big bucket housing plan, which was about $500 million last time we checked. And again, it may have just been, set it on fire because no one saw the pandemic. No one saw how we were going to have to redirect. And I can accept that too. I just really want the update. On the housing voucher program, beyond excited that the RFP is out. I just want to make sure I'm clear again. It is going to be really helping to fill in the gaps of people who are in or on public housing right now, forms of aid, but helping to fill in the gap is just make sure I'm clear about that. Where is it going? And it's about 500 of them, 500 vouchers. That's another quick question I have. And then I wanted to ask, I've had two constituents be in this situation, which is they're divorcing. It's a contentious divorce. There is not a restraining order. And each time they went to go look for housing, they had to include their spouse or their partner, and that income, and that's what they were told. Not by you, but that's their understanding on the form. And so that if you looked at their taxes, they are still filing joint. Okay. And so she's trying to leave him. He is abusive. They don't have the divorce yet. Do our policies really put them in a position where they are stuck because they have to include their spouse, and then they end up in a larger rent? So help me understand how to navigate a person who's divorcing, not yet divorced. And then I want to give a shout out. Thank you so much for the work on TOPA. Yes, you got it to the governor's desk. I want to give a shout out to the Homes Act too. I know you guys were supportive of that. Both got through. And then I wanted to go to IDP and linkage. I know we're in talks and we had a good hearing, and we're going to continue to have a good hearing about what it looks like to reform both of those systems. So I'm just saying we're on it. You guys are on it, but I think we all agree they're going to be changing. They need to change. Okay. And then finally to Will, or Will and DND, I think this is the two-part question. We had this really good conversation about discrimination in housing and using credit in our own affordable housing lotteries. And I think we were going to get back to that, whether we still looked at if they had bad credit and were no longer then deemed eligible for our lotteries for affordable units. I know ultimately we didn't get credit discrimination into our Human Rights Commission. law. We didn't get that as a, protected class, but we did think reforming all of our city policies that people's credit shouldn't hurt them on at least affordable housing. That's a lot, I know, but again, a lot of this is not, we've had a lot of these conversations where we go back and forth, and we'll continue to have those hearings, so no need to repeat them. This is just the kind of update. So thanks, guys.
So Rick, can you take the first question, because I think you've got the handle on the federal funds, and you're right, there was a very large announcement made. It was based on the transfer tax passing. It didn't pass, but I think Rick, can you take that first one?
Yeah. The announcement was $500 million over 5 years, and I think I want to say something like half of that was expected to come from the transfer tax. So obviously that has not come to fruition. Another significant portion was from the Lafayette Garage, and we did issue the RFP, and we are actually evaluating that right now. We did get responses back to the RFP, and we're evaluating that right now. The remainder was from increased city investment, which has largely come true from the city voucher program and additional funding for down payment assistance and homelessness. I haven't kind of done the math and reconciled to see if we met, but I'm pretty sure we're at or close to, or maybe even above what was anticipated or expected out of that plan. But yeah, I mean, obviously, COVID kind of threw everything for a loop. On the flip side, we did get, I think, something like $140 million in federal funding, one-time federal funding for COVID. It has to be kind of COVID related, either mitigating COVID or responding to COVID or recovering from COVID. But the rules for that have continued to get kind of loosened to allow us to use it more broadly, which we were excited to see. So that's, I don't know if that's where we are.
It might be helpful, Rick, to get over to the counselor, just, it's in here, but it's it's a little hard to pull out, like what we have now, the federal money, what we just project out the next couple of years. So there's a lot, Counselor Edwards. So IDP linkage, you're absolutely right. We did make, as you know, some improvements to linkage, but the idea was that we were going to look at it again after the pandemic was a little behind us. And IDP, there are internal conversations, as I mentioned, going on, and I think we're probably going to get before the City Council soon on some proposed changes to IDP. So I'm really happy to say that we are able to increase the linkage by 45, 48, 49%, something like that, but recognizing that there's more conversations to be had. Vouchers. Your question was about the first 250. I think I know, but I don't know if Jessica is closer to this than I am. But if she can't answer it, I can.
Sorry, the first voucher RFP.
Well, the voucher RFPs, how selection being handled for those vouchers.
Yeah. I can answer loosely. We probably should get back to you because BHA is the lead on that. But certainly on any projects that are for trying to make subsidized housing that we already have funding in more affordable to extremely low income tenants, we are consulting with the BHA, and that has been a really great process of consultation and really making sure that we're pushing the resources as far as we can. And then we probably should get you a little bit more specific information about who's on the BHA review team.
Okay, great. Credit's a big issue, and I know we're taking this up just as a barrier to home ownership, but it's also, as you know, it's a barrier to renting an apartment too. I know that in all of our language, we have, and you've probably seen it, Counselor, we have language that, people shouldn't be, it shouldn't be used as a barrier. It shouldn't be used as a way to not allow someone to rent an apartment. But I'd like to look at that language again. But oftentimes we are calling owners when someone is denied and kind of going head to head on what the language means and making the case that someone should absolutely get access to that unit. Maureen, I know that you're working on this issue too with the people buying homes.
Right, so we don't look at credit at all for our deed restricted home ownership units. We don't ask that on the application and at all. So no one, or resale units, so no one should be asked that when they're going through a deed restricted or a new construction home ownership unit, or for our financial aid, our down payment assistance at all.
Right. But they would run into credit issues at the at obtaining a mortgage.
Right. So that's the only time that someone's asked, and we are working with and have advocated that MHP and Mass Housing both lower their minimum credit scores, and they've done so. So now it's MHP's lowest credit score is 640, which is pretty good. They lowered it in the past year. Mass Housing, I believe, has lowered it as well. And we are kind of still pushing on them to lower it. The foreclosure rates for both of those products are very, very low, even with a lower credit score. So
I do think though, and I maybe it's something we could work on this coming year collectively. I do think more work needs to happen with some of the larger management companies. The work with the larger management companies around evictions has really improved. I mean, the data is showing them where the issues are, and they know that it is not to be tolerated, and they're really working with us better than they ever have. I do still think there's barriers to getting access to some of those units, especially inclusionary development units, if they're in a market rate development and they're used to seeing a certain credit score and a certain asset limit, et cetera, et cetera. So I really do think we could work on that. I think we do need to tighten that language up and the practice up.
And just on the, there was a DV or divorcing. I don't know if you just want me to follow directly up with you, Katie. I saw you nodding, or someone I can send her directly to you. That's her understanding. She's getting higher rents because she has to include his income because
right.
she's him. They file jointly. If she brings her in her taxes, she's leaving him and she feels stuck.
Yeah, we just had a case with this with the state rep's office, and we just showed them the docket filed at Suffolk, and they were able to only count the one spouse's income because of the docket, showing the court docket. So I'm really confused by this. Please send them to me. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And I just also, I know you guys are in transition too and looking for leadership or are finding leadership at OHS, because I saw Dominique's over at the Office of Equity. So I just wish you well, and I hope that as you continue, the office has grown so much. I've seen it just, of course, it's something I'm a little biased for, and I'm glad it's going to stay and its mission's going to stay, and it's the way it's moving creatively. I hope there's still a relationship, a legal one, and I saw you're working with VLP, you're working with the courts. Those things are all great. I think you have a unique, incredible gift in this office. And to see it flourish and grow is a big deal. So I'd love to check in about how it's going to continue to grow and how we can support you as a city council.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Edwards. Next up is, and I should just say my office has also been doing some research since we last all talked about the credit front. And we've talked to Tim Davis a bit, who's not here right now, about that. So I think we've got some work on that coming soon, and agree.
Yeah. The fact that I can't rattle off a really tight answer says to me that there's different policies and different programs, and different management companies do it differently. I think we probably do need to come together and talk about best practices.
Yeah, and I think there are some things that have been done elsewhere that we can copy, and it's dependent on it. There's a few different types of situations. It has to be customized, but yes. Next up is Councillor Asabi George, and then it'll be Councillor Mejia, Baker, Arroyo, Flaherty. Councillor Asabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to respect some of this 5-minute time here with you and perhaps ask questions in the second round. The two questions that I have, at least for this round, one is on the family-led stability pilot. The next will be on housing lottery. So first, on the family-led stability pilot, we continue to call it a pilot, and I'm certainly proud to be a founding member of it. But this partnership is growing. It began in 2016, targeted 7 schools with the largest population of students experiencing homelessness, with the goal to identify housing opportunities for students within close proximity to their school and connect families with additional support services. Can we get a brief update on the family-led stability program and its growth? I think we're expecting some growth in the next school year. And then on the housing lottery, a few years ago, we had a hearing on vacant affordable housing units. I know that Councillor Flynn earlier asked about some of that work. At that time, a few summers ago, we had maybe 100 vacant affordable units in the city. That number I know has improved. I'm hopeful that it's continued to decrease in the number of vacancies. So if someone could also speak to how we've improved that process of making sure Boston's residents can access those affordable units. So I'm happy to start with either family-led or affordable vacancies.
I can, I'll flip it, but we'll hopefully get you the answers that you're asking for. So as of right now, Councillor, there are 59 vacant affordable units that are in the Inclusionary Development Program or in our lot or our DND programs as well. And 39% of those 59 are in one development because the community has asked that we explore modifying the housing resource. The developer was meeting their obligation. It's in Councillor Flynn's district. They were meeting their obligation by they bought some SROs, and now the community is saying that they might want to see the same square footage, but the units to be enlarged and have more families. So those are kind of on hold for a discussion. So I'd say there's 20 vacant units as of the report that I got yesterday. So there's been a real concentrated effort to, move these forward. The delay oftentimes is with the developer not doing what they should be doing. And if you want the list, we can certainly get you that list. But I was reading most of them this morning. It seems like we're waiting for something from the developer, et cetera. Rick, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that. He oversees the person who does.
Yeah, no, I would say, I think it's like, including that project that you mentioned, Sheila, it's 6 total projects that make up those 20 units. So it's not a lot, not a lot of projects, and almost all of them had something unique about them. There was a project change. It went from rental to ownership or vice versa. Or some other kind of issue that, as Sheila mentioned, requires us to work with BPDA on, and we're doing that. And then there's this 139 unit project that is, going to take a little more work.
And the family-led stability, right? The last meeting that I attended, Councillor, there was conversations about expanding the family-led stability pilot to include a significant number of additional schools. I want to say like 8. I don't have notes in front of me for that. I wanted to pull together the nonprofits and the BPS to talk about that along with the BHA, because I want them to expand the program if there are resources. I know that the BHA is thinking of using some of the new vouchers to support homeless families like they were able to last year, which was, as we all agree, was just a wonderful initiative. I just don't want nonprofits to go into schools and say, we've got resources if they're not there. If they're going in, I want them to say they've got resources. So I think we got to finalize the number of this first round of vouchers that would be available for families. And we are, the BHA, and I'm sure they're going to have a hearing with you all as well. They are getting 480 vouchers to be used for individuals and families that are homeless. So we now have the city voucher program, which is terrific, and we do have some new vouchers coming from the feds in response to COVID. I just want to make sure before we announce expansions that we make sure that we've got the resources so families are not, misled that there's resources where there may not be enough. So I can get back to you with the number. I just want to have this internal meeting before we land on a number of expansions.
Great, appreciate that, and appreciate all the work that we've been able to do in partnership, especially around the Special Commission to End Family Homelessness. I know that we're getting close to hiring an individual to oversee that work and certainly work in partnership between the administration, my office, and providers and those with lived experiences. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll save my other questions for the next round. Thanks, Chief Dillon. Thanks, Chair King.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Asabi George. Before I even had to raise the gavel, modeling great behavior. Councillor Julia Mejia, and then it'll be Baker Arroyo Flaherty. Councillor Mejia?
Yeah, so first let me just start off by thanking Chief Dillon and her amazing team. My goodness, you guys always respond to all of our emails and constituent concerns and do so in such a timely fashion. It just feels so good to know that you all are part of the team and working so hard on behalf of so many people who are really nervous and scared and or just concerned about things that are happening. So I just wanted to say thank you so very much to you, Chief Dillon, and your entire squad for just always just being so amazing. So thank you. So I just have a few questions. You know, we've heard, and I think Kate Bennett from BHA was also, I don't know if she's on this call, but she's a rock star too. We met with a constituent probably a month or so ago who's a BHA she grew up in BHA housing, but when she turned 18 and went on to college, there was some concerns about the potential of losing the lease or putting her mom's lease at risk. So I'm just curious, how can the DNC work with BHA to make sure that part-time students who are able to work and go to school without risking higher rents for their families? Just kind of curious about what could be done around that area. And this is not something that has been a groundswell, but there are single dads who are raising their children, and I'm just curious what supports, if any, the team is doing to help support some of the fathers who are also experiencing homelessness. I know that they face additional barriers in terms of just kind of like where they're able to live. And I'm just curious what, if anything, is being done. And if you could just provide some insight. We've gotten a few calls around that, but not as much, but I'm just curious what that looks like. And then my last question is around for fair housing and equity. In the document that was sent over to our office, it says that the department has some salary savings due to regular employee attrition. Can you talk a little bit about how many employees leave on a yearly basis and what is being done to retain more employees within the office? And what is the plan to boost community engagement as we move out of COVID? Thank you.
So Councillor Rick did some research on this first question, so I'm going to hand it to him. Rick. Rick, can you hear me? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, first question. That'd be great. Thank you.
My internet just went out for a second. Yes, we did reach out to the BHA on this question. It's obviously this is really in their domain, but we do want to work with them to the extent we can. What they kind of referred to us to is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, which is a program that they have where BHA residents, when their income goes up, they can put that increased income into like an escrow account, so it doesn't get counted against them in their rent. So that they did mention that as a potential solution for this problem. There are also ways where certain types of income can be excluded from the rent calculations, but I think and I think Councillor Bach knows this pretty well. We discussed this at one of our recent hearings. That it does depend on the type of voucher, and there's only so much flexibility we can offer depending on whether it's the type of voucher that it is. If you want more details, I think it's probably best that we can get a more clear answer from the BHA. But that is some of the information that they provided to us.
But there is an avenue, it sounds like.
Yeah. That's
good. You raised single dads that are homeless or have housing challenges. You're right. Sometimes it's harder for single dads with kids if they're homeless to enter family shelters because there's a male or they have older teenage sons and they don't always offer to put those families up in scattered sites. So we've seen that as well. Sometimes we really have to advocate at the state. But if there are, and I don't know any, and so I don't know if they exist, but they probably do. If there are nonprofits that are working with single dads or support groups or just nonprofit organizations that are working with this population, be glad to reach out, talk about, rental relief and helping people with housing search. And if there's a way to connect in more of a sort of an infrastructural way, I'd be glad to do that. I'm not aware of any, so I'd have to reach out to, or I'd have to rely on you and others, but would be glad to do that.
Yeah. So I would just name two, Father's Uplift, ran by Charles Daniel. That would be, and then also the Family Nurturing Center on Bowdoin Street. They have a fatherhood engagement.
Okay, I know them. Okay. If maybe we could follow up afterwards, or I could follow up with your staff, we could just, do a
little information on just
housing search. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then just in terms of fair housing and equity, could we talk a little bit about some of the regular employee attrition and, what are we doing to retain and keep employees within the office?
Thank you, Counselor. So one of the things that has happened is most of our employees are folks who come to us who have graduated law school. And so, they come in for a period of time, they work with us, and we've lost them really because we hadn't been able to really pay them enough, or I would say that they work with us to get the experience and then they move on. So one of the things we have done to remedy that problem is we've upped the salaries that we now offer to many of these folks who, our investigators who come on to work for us. And that has seemed to work out pretty well because over the last year, we've been able to maintain more staff by doing that. So that is the way we have now found to combat and keep many of our good employees who are great investigators working for the Office of Fair Housing and Equity, if that answers your question.
And can we talk a little bit about what the plan is to boost community engagement as we move out of COVID, like in terms of communication, any PSAs or just kind of word of mouth? How are we helping folks as we move out of COVID? And what can we do to help support those efforts?
Absolutely. So what we currently do is we have we've engaged in a really robust Twitter campaign. Also, one of the things we do is we have a strong education and outreach team that goes to community meetings through the Office of Neighborhood Services and spreads the word about the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. Another thing we have done is that our office has partnered with two major organizations. One is MAHA. So anytime MAHA is doing their first time homebuyers classes, we are a consistent participant to teach first time homebuyers and landlords about fair housing laws. The next thing is that we've partnered with the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, especially throughout the Fair Housing Month, which was April. We had about over 300 participants that we linked up with that were realtors that we gave a crash course in just fair housing law. One of the things we're also looking to do is continue this relationship where moving forward, they would need to come to us as one of the requirements of renewing their real estate licenses. I know that this has passed, well, we passed this or we sent legislation or the mayor's last legislational package. That was one of the things we highlighted on, but the real estate board for the state has already moved on it. And the Greater Boston Real Estate Board now recommends us as one of the main organizations that any of the realtors can go to get training in order to keep up with the renewal of their real estate licenses.
Thank you. And I'll just say, again, I want to echo how incredibly grateful our entire team is to your work and everyone here on the Zoom, Katie, Taylor, Kate, Sheila, the whole squad. I mean, just thank you so very much for all your hard work. I know this is one of the most hot topic button issues when it comes to housing, and you guys are doing an amazing job at keeping up with all of these demands that we have to serve. So thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Council, there is one more thing I will share, which is that this fall in September, we are looking to bring Secretary Fudge from, from HUD to Boston for a major fair housing symposium. We're working along with our commissioners, the CAC, which is the Community Activist Committee, and HUD to do this. So I think somewhere, once we have a date that's settled, we'll be doing a major event with Secretary HUD and Mayor Janey in September.
Awesome. All right, well, make sure you translate that in every language so we can all show up and participate. Thank you.
Absolutely, most certainly.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Baker, and then it's Arroyo and Flaherty. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Sheila, and to all your team. And like everybody said, thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing during not just this hard last year and a half we have, but also everything leading up to that, your work, especially around helping us to house homeless and high need people and those sorts of things. Sheila, can you talk a little bit about, I have a couple things, the MAHA, the first generation match program, like will you break that down for me? What is the match? How do you get in line for it? And also a little more about the 1+ program. Like you'd give me a quick synopsis of them.
Yep,
please.
I'm gonna have Maureen. I can do it, but I'm gonna have Maureen because she really is. She's closer to it.
That's why you're the boss, Sheila. Whoever you need to have do it.
But she's gonna make it quick.
I'll make it quick. So first gen, real simple. If you're the first generation to own in your family and you can save $2,500, MAHA, using our funds, using police overtime budget funds, will give the home buyer $5,000 in a grant, not a loan. So together they'll have $7,500 to put towards closing costs or down payment assistance. They can use that in addition to our regular assistance. So that's first gen.
Yeah.
Very successful. And if anybody wants to enroll in it, they just have to call or email Mass Affordable Housing Alliance. We're about to give them some more money to enroll, I think, 50 more participants. And then we will be continuing the program into the next fiscal year, as long as this budget passes. So
you get 7,500. What if you already have, say, $12,000 or down payment? Do you still get that 70? Like, can it go on top of a down payment already?
Yeah, it can go on top of a down payment, but you do have to be the first person to own in your family. First generation. So 1+, combination of interest subsidy and down payment assistance. So they go through the 1 program, so they can only go up to 100% AMI because we're using CPA funds. They have to live in the city of Boston. They can't, our other funds are available for folks moving in, but for 1+, you have to currently live in the city. You get a further interest rate reduction from the current 1 interest rate, and we give you enhanced down payment assistance. So together, that means you can buy more. That's the simplest way and the fastest way to put it. We have it's incredible demand. We've processed about 250 applications. We're adding lenders daily, weekly. So we have 2 more lenders coming on, and we have interest from 2 other ones. So we need more lenders to participate.
So it's first time buyer, and is it income based on your income? You go up to 100% AMI?
Yes, because we use CPA funds, and CPA allows you to go up to 100% AMI. So yes, for that one, for our regular down payment assistance program, you can go up to 135% AMI. But because this is CPA funded, it's 100%.
Okay, and are we doing anything, and this is just for anybody that can answer, are we doing anything that connects directly to, how we need to, as City of Boston employees, we need to stay in the city? Are we connected on to any of the city unions for help in down payments for city workers that need to stay in Boston? Any programs?
So we allow if someone wants to use our down payment assistance program and they have money from either SEIU or AFSCME or any of the other unions, because they have their own down payment assistance programs. We allow them to use it so they can kind of stack it if they need it. Because ours is based on a need it's a need-based program. So if they need it, we give it to them on top of what they already have.
Oh, so we'll just allow them to use the city benefit that's coming from the unions. Nothing, we don't really do anything proactively for the city unions.
Well, my understanding is that we're putting in some funds into that trust fund, and that then union employees are able to access it through SEIU or AFSCME. I'm more familiar with those two programs than fire and police and BTU, but if they get it through their funds, they can stack it with us.
So the regular unions that do it are just SEIU and AFSCME outside of police, fire, and teachers?
Yeah, police, fire, and BTU may have it. I'm not as familiar, but we serve the management. They have management seats on AFSCME and SEIU, and DND serves on those. We have management seats on those two union trust funds. So I know more about those trust funds than I do about the other three.
Okay, thank you. Sheila, do you have any opinion on
Councilor Baker, we just lost you.
And I always have an opinion. I'm just waiting for.
I know. I'm confident you're going to have an opinion. But Councilor Baker, we just completely lost whatever you said. You started asking Sheila if she had an opinion, and then it cut out.
Okay, do you have me there? Okay. Sheila, about opening back up and efficiencies that we've been able to attain during COVID. So like hybrid, how and again, we're going to be told how to come back in, but have you seen any or heard of any real efficiencies with people staying home, being able to do their jobs better? Will you be able to cobble together a workforce that may be a hybrid of what we used to do and what we currently do? Any thoughts on it?
I do have opinions, but I'll probably keep them. This one I'll probably keep to myself. So as you probably know, the city is in the middle of giving instructions on remote work and reporting back to work in person, et cetera. And I think some of that information is getting out this week. I know that they are going to be interested in hearing from many of us on how remote work has gone and what we've learned and best practices. So I think I will defer to A&F on this. But I will say, it's a credit to DND staff, and I'm sure other divisions and departments would attest to it too. We haven't lost a beat. We have worked hard. We've done well. People know I've mastered muting with lots of little kids around, but it's the work, as you know from the numbers that I showed earlier. We've had a really productive year with people working remote. So I think some of us are even saying that we're more exhausted after a day of remote meetings, because you go from one to the other and you don't even have the built-in breaks of moving. So I think that we've done a really good job, and I look forward to giving my opinions to A&F about what we've learned.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, sorry to put you on the spot like that. I'm thinking about it because I know there are certain operations that can probably layer in a little bit of the remote, and it would help us on a lot of different levels.
I will say one thing, Frank. I mean, one thing that we will be thinking about, D&D certainly will be thinking about is, all of the community processes that we run, right? We run on when we develop a program or dispose of land or do, community planning in various parts of the city. I know that some people really miss being in person, but we've had a lot of really good participation. So I think that is something that we do need to look at collectively, because there's a lot of moms, dads, and seniors that would rather get on Zoom because now they know how than trek out in bad weather to go to a community meeting. So I do think we need to figure out how we continue to keep folks that wouldn't necessarily be engaged.
Thank you. I lost there for a little while, but I know what you were saying. Can someone talk about, well, actually, let me get into, so before I run out of time. Oh, can I ask one more line, Kenzie?
Yeah, one more is fine.
Okay, Sheila, you and I have spoken a little bit about Upham's Corner, and the administration has asked about an RFP for Hamlet Street there that will go to you. How much involvement has DND had in that planning initiative study up there? And in particular, do you know anything about what we're looking at, what DSNI is looking to do around the Citizens Bank?
So I'm going to hand this over to Jessica on the street discontinuance, but DNI does own the Citizens Bank, and they did an RFP. We're not on this. We are officially not on the selection criteria, and there were 2 good proposals that came forward, and I know that there's a lot of opinions in Upham's proper, and then Upham's the surrounding area to Upham's. I don't have a latest as of this afternoon on when a decision is going to be made. I know that there was some interest in postponing a decision until more voices could be heard. So let me get the latest, because it's changing, every couple of hours, and I'll be in touch. But when we did provide resources for DNI to fund or to buy the Citizens Bank, which we do with nonprofits, we give acquisition funding to nonprofits. We didn't make, we didn't stipulate that the city of Boston would have a say in who the chosen developer would be. So I will get an update though and circle back.
But shouldn't we have somewhat of where we, through the BPDA, have the eye that's looking towards the whole area? Shouldn't we automatically have some kind of say in there if we know or have a vision as a city and city agencies is what should potentially happen up there with the Strand and the way we're trying to craft the whole thing? Will we have involvement across the street near, like with the Strand RFP and all those other RFPs?
Right.
Who's going to run those?
Yeah, those are being run by the city. So those RFPs are being run by the city. Developers are going to be selected by the city or the BPDA. So those are going to have much more city involvement. Jess, I don't know if there's anything you want to add about Hamlet Street.
Yeah. So to Sheila's point, not only will those RFPs have a lot of city involvement, but we have had staff engaged in the initial planning for those city-owned parcels that predate my tenure with the city. So for quite some time, and on Hamlet Street in particular, if the council approves, then Hamlet Street will become a DND parcel, so that when the RFP goes out, we'll be the ones overseeing that selection. So a selection committee will be largely, comprised of our team, and then of course in partnership with the WAG, the BPDA's working area group that has been really working at this, in partnership with the city since the beginning. So it will be, it's a different process than what's going on right now with the DSNI owned building, and will look probably more similar to other significant RFPs that DND has put out, other than that this is a partnership with a number of different city agencies.
Jessica, the council would be interested in this. That piece of Hamlet Street has not been surplus, correct?
It has not been surplus yet, nope. So
Councilor Baker, we would have to go before the city council to get that piece of property surplus.
Well, I mean, that's what's being talked about now, and the first move that's happening up there seems like a misstep to me. So doesn't make me want to support that. And I'd have to see more. I'd have to see the city officially say, show me exactly what the whole plan for the place is, because if that's parking, if that's parking without getting too much into it, and this, we're taking away parking that could be for the Strand. One of the Citizens Bank proposals was for some parking, which would be directly across the street from the Strand. I think the city, whether it's BPDA or who it is, needs to step up here and give some guidance, I think. Just a thought.
No, I hear you. And first, yeah, this is being debated in a lot of corners. I'll just leave you with this thought, that DNI is not acting solo here. They have a community advisory put together from community members and leadership as well. So it's a lot of folks are weighing in on this one, but not necessarily the city.
But again, Sheila, where I have an issue here is, why do we, as the city of Boston, where we have planners and we have people that do this every day, day in, day out, why do we?
Councilor Baker, we just lost you again.
Okay.
Councilor, all right, I think I'm just gonna make an executive decision that you all can continue this conversation. I think Councilor Baker has put a pin in this topic, obviously. Councilor Baker, you cut out at the tail end there, but I think we do have to move on. I think your concern about this has been communicated to the department. So.
Yeah, why do we buy land for $1 million and give it to a nonprofit to run when it should be done by city agencies? That's all I want to say. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Arroyo and then Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you so much. I'll try to stay within my time. Just want to join the chorus of thank yous to the Department of Fair Housing, the Office of Fair Housing, and the Department of Neighborhood Development, just for being timely with callbacks. I also want to commend Katie Ford, who I know is on here, who has served in a couple of constituent emergencies on very short notice, well beyond the hours of City Hall to take care of issues for me. So I appreciate that very much. To jump right into some of the questions. Many of the Office of Fair Housing and Equity staff are funded through external funding. Are there any plans by the administration to make at least some of these positions funded through the operating budget? How stable is the amount of external funds that support these positions? Does it change from year to year?
So, hi, Councilor Will Anoha for the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. So the first question is, how stable the funds? I would say that our funds are very stable. We were in conversations with the city prior to COVID about moving some positions on to the operating budget, but because of COVID, those conversations were halted, as you can imagine. We are picking it back up with OBM with hopes that in FY22 we're going to pick up more than where we left off, where some or more than some of the positions will be back, meaning investigative positions will be funded by the operating budget. So that's the first answer to your first question. The second thing is we have a decent surplus right now from our grants. So in terms of running the office, there's no problem in terms of the funding of the office. Currently, there's none.
Fantastic. And actually, I think you're probably going to be the one to answer these next questions, because I remember you were the one at the hearings. But to what extent is the Office of Fair Housing and Equity proactively investigating cases of discrimination in Boston rather than depending on residents to file complaints?
So I'm going to turn that over to Andrew, but before I do, because Andrew's the Director of Investigations. Currently, as you know, Counselor, we have an ongoing investigation that I can't get into, that we talked about with you and some of the other counselors who are on this in this hearing on October 13th, where we are actively investigating discrimination in the city of Boston, both for race and voucher discrimination. Of course, this was something that came up because of an article that was written on July 1st of last year by the Globe. Tim Logan wrote that article, as you can account or remember, and the study was done by the Boston Foundation and Suffolk Law. Just to give you a quick background, we were not able to attain that information because it was done for educational purposes. So FERPA laws prevented us from getting it. So we contracted Suffolk to do the same testing for us, to test that sample and more. So currently we are actively going after discrimination on our own. And what happens is any place where we find that landlords, banks, developers, whomever are engaged in discriminatory practices, we open up what is called a commission-initiated complaint against them, where we seek enforcement, where the city of Boston becomes the complainant, and we seek enforcement against said actor. And I'll turn the rest over to Andrew.
And so, hi, Councilor Arroyo, Andrew Espinosa for Office of Fair Housing. Yeah, what Will said about the partnership with Suffolk is correct. It's true that traditionally our office and other fair housing offices like ours have relied on receiving complaints from the public. But by partnering with Suffolk's testing program and receiving the results of their testing, that's us being proactive. It's basically Suffolk sends the testers out into the field. They do the tests, they see if there's discrimination happening in the real estate transactions that they are trying to engage in, and they report any positive results for discrimination back to us. And we in turn turn those results into commission-initiated complaints. So instead of just waiting on members of the public to contact us and doing intake like we did traditionally, this is us going out into the city and proactively going after landlords, going after realtors, going after property management companies that are engaging in these practices, and investigating and then doing enforcement against them. So there's the commission-initiated complaints. And then also the other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is that we've been in sporadic talks with affirmative marketing to do more with properties that are subject to affirmative marketing plans. As we understand it, our commission also has jurisdiction to do enforcement around violations of affirmative marketing plans. So we've been talking and trying to ponder ideas about getting something off the ground where if there's a violation of an affirmative marketing plan, they could bring that complaint before the commission, and the commissioner can make a decision about what to do in that decision rather than, the traditional means that have been being utilized to address those problems.
Thank you on that. And I guess the question sort of related to this budget in the sense that it might be a part of future budgets, but in what ways are we creatively, because I'm aware of the Suffolk one, where obviously we held a hearing on this. I wrote a piece for this in terms of a hearing order. I'm aware that there's sort of like the randomized enforcement there because we're essentially testing, on the field, are you following these laws or not? What other methods besides this one that I'm well aware of could we do moving forward to sort of proactively ensure that this is a permanent process where we're permanently doing this? Because if I'm not mistaken, and maybe the Suffolk kind of partnership is one, but my understanding is the partnership with Suffolk is sort of a level of time or a period of time where they will do these sort of enforcement techniques of going through the processes and flagging problems, but then it ends. What are we doing to proactively ensure that we're yearly doing this from here until eternity? I guess basically, what are we doing for that?
Well, the first thing is we currently have a re-up in our budget to keep this going. So Suffolk will be doing this for us again for another year. And we've been blessed to get CBDG funds to continue to do this. And believe it or not, what is being yielded from this, I believe, has made more than a case for us to continue getting the funding that we need in order to do this. So I cannot foresee why it would not continue, Councilor, to be very honest with you, because it has proven to be extremely beneficial both to our office, the City of Boston, and HUD as well.
Well, I think sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say, Suffolk's actually brought on a specific testing coordinator just to work in conjunction with our office. So as long as the funding allows, we want to basically re-up this partnership with them for as long as we can, and work with the testing coordinator and just keep doing testing in the city of Boston.
Fantastic. I just, so for my office, in terms of my focus on this, I think obviously the results of that Suffolk study are incredibly troubling. Something like upwards of 70% of people of color experiencing housing discrimination. That's a stain on the city. And as far as moving forward and how we do that, consider my office a partner in making sure that whatever funding is required, whatever ordinances or things we can do moving forward to sort of really take a bite out of that and go after bad actors. I think that should be a priority for the city. It's certainly a priority for me. And I think it's clearly a priority for the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. So moving forward, please make sure we're looped in on ways in which we can help support your efforts and in fact enhance them where possible. I'm going to leave it there for my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thanks so much, Councillor Arroyo. Councillor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just want to thank Chief Dillon, Deputy Directors Wright, Wilson, Bernstein, Director Uwanawa, for the number of senior members that are on this budget hearing. And let me first start by saying something that you already know. As an agency, you're already tasked with addressing one of our city's most pressing issues, which is affordable housing. Before I dive in, I want to take a moment to thank you for the enormous work that you undertook, Chief, during the pandemic in order to set up the rental relief program and de-densify our shelters and so much more. So you've been responsive to me in my office, and we've consistently been impressed with your entire team's dedication and passion for helping our city get out from under this pandemic. And so with that, I guess I'd like to know some of DND's priorities with respect to the federal relief funding. City Council has created a new committee, and I've been asked by my colleagues, in particular Council President O'Malley, to lead that effort as chair, working obviously with my colleagues as well to make sure that we're getting the funding to folks that have been decimated by COVID. And so I'd love to get a sense of what DND's priorities are, and obviously an offer to work together with you moving forward through past the budget process. Also, BHA's partnerships with BPS to house homeless families, it's extremely important. Does this budget increase the amount of vouchers available to our homeless BPS families? And also our elderly? Do we have, have we targeted the amount of affordable housing that we're developing for seniors? Our seniors are inundated almost daily with cash offers for their homes, and it's become difficult for seniors, particularly fixed income seniors who are, house rich and cash poor, and who've made the city what it is today to remain in the neighborhoods that they love due to the cost of living increases in the latest round of property tax. It's crippling folks. And then on the home ownership side, the One Plus program, it's an amazing program. Last year, there were 247 applications, 52 purchases. Clearly, I think we need more lender participation. I know they're not the easiest loans to close, if you will, but if we can continue to work with our partnering banks to expand that program, I think we would be well served. And also, can you talk about the first generation matched savings program and what type of outreach enrollment does it look like for that program? And then with respect to real estate management and disposition for the properties that are listed as undevelopable, are those parcels that could be eligible for, say, CPA funds through the new open space acquisition program? Is, and I don't have to remind everybody that I'm a huge supporter of the CPA and so happy to see tens of millions of dollars go towards affordable housing. So, and again, Sheila, into your team, I think you guys have done a great job. So look forward to continued partnership, and I'll listen carefully for the answers to some of the questions that I posed. And thank you, Madam Chair.
I couldn't write fast enough, Counselor. So if I missed something, I'll please let me know. So
thank you. I have to get them in before the gavel swings.
We have been working and really we have got a lot of new federal funding, which is exciting. It's one time. It has to tie back to COVID uses. As you know, we're making more money available to households that can't pay their rent. So there is additional resources going there. although we are, I'm going to let Lila just kind of quickly talk a bit about how we're using some of the federal funds with supporting our homeless populations. But we would like to use some of these funds also for permanent solutions. Well, it's one-time money, so we can't set up programs that, that may not be able to, we might not be able to fund going forward. But we'd like to, respond to COVID, making sure people stay in their homes, or use the money for one-time acquisitions or opportunities in the market where we can bring on additional permanent supportive housing for both families and individuals. But before I move on to the other questions, Lila, if you could just talk a little bit about how we're spending the funding for our homeless populations, the federal money.
Absolutely. So we received a lot of different buckets of federal funding, but a lot of it is targeted to responding to homelessness. And primarily we've been allocating that to housing responses. So we're spending the majority of the funds out the door in one of the buckets that comes through my shop on rapid rehousing, which is short and medium term rental assistance along with services for people who are exiting homelessness. That said, we've also spent some of the funding on shelter costs. At first, it was just emergency needs for households who are currently in shelter and for shelters to operate. The state then took on a lot of that, those costs. We've stood up beds for people fleeing domestic violence and for families that aren't currently eligible for the state sheltering system. And then we're more long-term, we've been looking at acquisition opportunities for acquiring properties that could be permanent supportive housing for households. So that's kind of the buckets. We can get you a more precise breakdown if you'd like that, but that's more or less where we're spending our funding. And I can just on the BPS families, the emergency housing vouchers that are being allocated to BHA, Sheila mentioned before, there are 480 coming in. That's also part of the relief funding. Or recovery funding, I guess it's called now. I don't know, rescue, I don't know which one it is, but the vouchers that just got allocated, the population broadly is for homeless and at-risk households. I think BHA is considering targeting some of those vouchers for families who are in the BPS system who are experiencing homelessness or are at risk of homelessness. So that hasn't been fully determined yet, but it's a decision that's jointly made between BHA and the Continuum of Care body, which is a board that DND convenes, but it is really a community decision. So in the next few weeks, that'll get hammered out.
And if I could I'll continue and see if I could do the rapid fire answers, but thanks, Lila. I agree with you, Counselor, and I think we all do that. We, we don't have enough senior housing, especially those on fixed incomes. And I mentioned earlier that this last year, we were able to permit just shy of 300 new units, which is not enough. I will be the first to admit it, but we haven't had a senior pipeline. So we've been working very, very hard about putting out city-owned land, working with the BHA on new sites, et cetera. So we are happy to see that housing come online and start construction and come online. So and any ideas that the City Council has on other sites that we may want to explore for senior housing, we are all ears because we really do want to continue to grow that pipeline. And then finally, Maureen Flynn mentioned the First Gen program. We are working with MAHA. We are getting that program, the information out on that program through nonprofits, through our home buying networks, through banks, et cetera. So if you also too, if there's a way that you want to help us promote that, it's a fabulous program. It's super easy too, save some money, get 2 for 1. So we really do want to continue. We're going to continue funding that program. So if we can work with you on getting the word out to any of your networks or nonprofits, we really would love to do that.
Councillor Flaherty, is that all right? The time's elapsed. I'm going to go with yes. Thank you,
I'm set. I'm all set. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, I'll jump to my questions now, and then we'll do a quick second round for a couple of counselors I know who wanted just to ask a couple more things. Yeah, so, and I echo everybody's thanks to the team. And, you know, I was actually thinking earlier, I think I know the answer to the number of units at Patricia White for Councilor Braden, but I think from the BHA stuff to the One Plus Boston Mortgage, the first gen, there are just so many things that, you know, I've worked on as an advocate and as a counselor that I see you guys bringing to fruition and running. And it just like, you know, we're still facing a housing crisis that we have to throw the kitchen sink at, but we're certainly throwing the kitchen sink at it. And I'm just grateful to you all. And obviously it's our job on the political side to get you more resources and a bigger kitchen sink. So yeah, I guess a couple of questions for me. One is just something I know is moving, but I just would love a quick update. And I think maybe this is a Maureen question, but on the co-op front, if you could just speak to both the revolving fund to help folks with share loans for people watching at home. It can be really hard for people without lots of resources to buy in, even though co-op shares are much smaller than a traditional mortgage because a lot of banks don't finance them. It can be tricky. So if you could speak to that, and then also the first-time home buyer class, sort of integrating some co-op education in, I'd love to hear about that.
Sure, and I'll try to be quick. So on the revolving loan fund, we are partnering, as you probably know, with SART, Symphony Area, something Trust, and they're using a pot of money to begin a revolving loan fund that'll work a lot like our down payment assistance program, but will be for buyers who buy into co-ops, first-time buyers of into co-ops. So we're putting the final touches on the agreement and hoping to start that program up. We will help them market it so that they don't have to market it alone. And so we think that's going to be a fabulous program. Secondly, on our, we're now requiring our providers of housing education services to incorporate a module, a small short module on co-ops. So we've done a train the trainer event and hired someone to do training for our providers. They all attended, and we're integrating that information into our HB 101 classes going forward. Beginning in the new fiscal year, we will also be doing a module on a separate workshop on co-ops, so that if anyone's interested in the co-ops from the HB 101 classes, they can go into a workshop and learn more, because there's a lot of information. And like you said, it's kind of new and different than your traditional buying a home. So we're going to offer a workshop, a repeating workshop for those folks that are more interested. Did I cover both?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. Yes,
Okay.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, just would love to stay apprised of all that and really appreciate the progress. And then could you all speak a little bit, I guess let me ask a quick question to Will, which is just, and it's kind of following up on what Councilor Arroyo was saying. I mean, to me, there's a long-term benefit to people in the city, specifically landlords in the city, perceiving that fair housing testing is something we, the city, routinely do, and that we're, you know, cycling through different types of discrimination, and that there's, because just like, frankly, the chances that, like, people sense that there is a chance that they will be apprehended affects their behavior. And I think it's really good to hear that you guys are pursuing, like with the Attorney General's office, some active suits, because I think certainly when Seattle did that, it helped get a bunch of people to correct their behavior. But Seattle also went on to sort of create an in-house effort that routinely does this to kind of make it stick. And so I don't hear us going in that direction yet. And so I just like to know a little bit about, have you guys thought about that, about a road to an in-house thing? And then can you just clarify for me? I think I still haven't quite tracked it. So there was that 250 that you got for the Suffolk contract. And then there's the new 200 in the budget this year, but that's not all for that. So what's the ongoing contractual payment with Suffolk for this fair housing testing work once the 250 is exhausted?
So the 250 will carry us up on till about, I want to say, December of 2021. Then we will recontract with Suffolk for we got $200,000 that we would use to recontract with them to do the same amount of testing.
And we expect that to cover about another year?
That's exactly it, to cover about another year.
Okay. So we're sort of weirdly off cycle with the fiscal year now on these.
Yeah, I mean, the 250, what happened was it was for something like 200 or so, and then we upped it. We said, you know what, let us get about 100 tests out of it. So we upped it. We threw another 50,000 at it in order to bring it full cycle, so it would match exactly what they did last year. In this upcoming year, we're in conversations with them already to see if we could do the same exact thing for that same amount. So instead of 250, it'll be for the exact $200,000.
Got it. And will we cycle through different types of, like, obviously you have to send different types of matched pairs to test for different discrimination against different protected classes, and are we working on that? And then also, I know we saw really high discrimination against transgender individuals, and I think just that it can be tricky to get a big enough population to test for that. So just wondering if that's on our radar too.
So I'll let Andrew touch on that in a moment, but how we intend to do it is, the beautiful thing is that we can switch our testing at any given moment, Counselor, as you rightfully asked, right? We can test for any of the 14 protected classes on any scenario we want. So we have a lot of leg room to switch up our testing to make sure that we're testing for all the different protected classes. Right now, we just happen to focus on race and voucher discrimination because that was the one that, punched really hard last year. But to answer your question, we can switch it up, and I'll turn it over to Andrew because Andrew oversees all the investigations.
Yeah, I'll just add in that Will's absolutely correct. We're not, per the MOA with Suffolk, we're not locked into the race and voucher focus of the studies. That's basically, we agree that would be the focus of this current testing round, but they've made it clear that if we want to switch up the protected classes being tested, we just have to request it. So for example, under the race testing that started, again, not going into too much detail because of confidentiality, but we started with mostly African-American race-based testing. But because of the rise in hate crimes against AAPI people, we've started they've started doing some testing at our request to do race testing based on Asian testers, with the control tester being Caucasian. So there is flexibility there. And we have talked about it informally with them. There aren't solid plans, but we could put gender identity or gender expression as one of the requested protected classes to be tested. It would just be a matter of us putting that to Suffolk and they would formulate the tests.
Got it.
And to add to that, I believe you asked about Seattle. The thing with Seattle is that we are substantially equivalent to HUD. And even in years ago, back in the 80s, Counselor, City of Boston did have its own testing program, but over time it faded out. The beautiful thing with us doing it the way we're doing it now is that even though we are a FAP, Suffolk is a FIP, and we're all under the same parent company, if you will, which is HUD. Right. So any contract we have currently that exists with Suffolk School of Law, HUD oversees it to make sure that it, because both agencies report to HUD, that it's legit and it follows certain guidelines. Another thing to add to it is that even though we don't have our own per se, it gets rid of the perception, or better yet, when we bring people in, meaning folks who are violators or who have engaged in discriminatory practices, it gets rid of them saying, well, the City of Boston is biased against me because it's done completely by a third party, an independent third party, right? So it gets rid of that argument, and it really points to a pattern and practice that said individual is really engaging in discriminatory practices.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess it does seem like for the long run, we'll probably have to ramp up some capacity if we want to regularly do enforcement actions, since obviously that's not something that Suffolk can do for us. So yeah, more conversation to come. But it's exciting that we're doing this and that we're re-upping the contract. And I think it's so important. It's such a persistent barrier and contributes so much to the segregation of our communities. And you know, when we made the change for the federal vouchers to small area fair market rent, we really removed a lot of the price excuse on this front. And so what you're left with is just the discrimination. And so it's very good to be working on this. I think we've used my time, so I'm going to quickly cycle through colleagues who have second round questions, and I might ask one or two more at the end. Councillor Edwards, do you have any second rounds?
Yes. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was scared. I apologize. Just following up on, can you see me now? Okay. Just following up on second round questions, I wanted to talk about whether the city has, and I know Frank touched a great deal about acquisition of properties. I'm interested more in being more aggressive in when properties are coming up for auction, as you saw with the what you call the Loftel in East Boston, and when those opportunities, I mean, literally just competing on the open market. I feel like the city could compete, maybe not dollar for dollar, but you also can come with a whole bunch of other benefits to come as a package deal. If you sell to the city of Boston, the process could move faster. We could help with zoning, or help with permitting in a way. And I'm wondering if we could develop a program that allows for us to compete on the market and come with a package. I don't expect us to win every single deal, but I mean, Jessica was, so thank you so much for being so responsive to that. But I really do want us to think about how we can move when these opportunities come up. It's a huge building already, was supposed to be a hotel. It's gone somewhat in the bankruptcy, not in bankruptcy, but the auction may have been canceled. But if it does come back up again, could the city be in a position to offer a package? So that's one thing I'm wondering. And I know that we've worked extremely hard on streamlining and working with homeless populations. This is kind of Layla, if you just give an update, this is not a criticism at all. I know how incredibly hard you work. So if you could talk a little bit more about the homelessness programming and recovery services, and how we pipeline from places like Mass and Cass, and we account for the recovery and the housing needs of those individuals. I have a methadone clinic near my house, so this is not to call out any particular community or any particular, I'm not trying to create or add to the stigma. I just think when the housing needs of people who are in recovery might be different, and how are we making sure that we're hitting both needs? So those are my follow-ups.
So I'll just respond to the acquisitions. I am in full agreement that we're not going to win everyone, right? There's just a lot of very wealthy people out there with seems like sometimes endless amounts of money. Although I do, we've been talking internally, we work with a lot of nonprofits to do acquisitions, but sometimes they don't have an interest in it. It's too big for them, or for whatever reason, it doesn't fit their profile. So I would like to see the city figure out how we could be more of a player with acquisitions. I know similar conversations are going on at the BPDA. I won't speak for them. The DND's, the way that we're set up, our charter limits what we can and cannot do. If we have a real estate interest in something, we can. But I would love to, work with you on that and see if we can't figure that out. Like, who can do acquisitions, when, for how much? I'm hoping that opportunities come our way. We were hopeful, not that we want a falling out of the real estate market, but that things were starting to get a little shakier, and there might have been some good opportunities. And that seems to be drying up, but I do think we should be ready if the market gets it all soft, or there's the one-offs. So I'd love to work with your office on this. I think we should look at it. Lila, I'll hand it over to you on Mass Cass and supportive housing coordination.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, and one that we all struggle with is, how to support people who are both dealing with housing instability and a serious substance use disorder. And I actually think the housing need isn't that different than anyone else, but the service need is. And so that's something that we are working on in coordination with the Office of Recovery Services. And we're actually looking into funding a team that would be really well coordinated and embedded with the work that's already happening at MassCast, but would be housing focused. And so they would kind of join the partners. There are a lot of partners out there, but I think that we could have a team that's housing focused and well integrated, so that people are gaining access to housing alongside of gaining access to recovery services at the same time. Because it's almost like if both aren't moving forward, either one might fail. And so I do think that's part of what the struggle is. We kind of have two under-resourced responses, not working as well for people, either one of them not working as strongly as it could and not as coordinated as it could be. And so we are looking to invest some of the federal funding that we have in hand now to improve that. But it's really massive. The need is really massive, and it's not just at MassCast, it's kind of across the city.
Across the state, right? And I just want to, and that's why I wasn't at all a criticism of the incredible amount of work you were doing. Just an update, just a question and update. And I look forward to, if you want in any way, shape, or form, I'd love to be there to get and help with some updates on that. I think, as you mentioned, and I didn't mean to create any stigma, but the services are necessary. And I'll give a shout out to Jessica and the other members of the NHT. One of the projects we recently funded was that kind of co-living healing place from Pine Street, right? That had market-based housing, middle market housing, and also formerly homeless housing. Majority of it was, and people were using that new housing model, shared kitchens and stuff, as a place to heal as well from recovery. So that I think that's an example of maybe things we can continue to fund and grow and help. And I wanted to give a shout out to Donald. You went through a huge amount of the diversity outreach and pipelines for your contracting, right? And I'm sure they either are close to or meeting the executive order, I think, that former Mayor Walsh signed on his way out there. And I just want to give you, it's definitely higher than the other departments in terms of the pipelines. Are you going to be offering and continue to offer, again, there was that training you did for minority contractors, and it wasn't contract like the GC contract training that the Office of Economic Development does. It was about navigating the city system, literally okay.
Right, that was we had done a number of workshops over the years to increase our MBWBE procurement. And so we realized that we had to create what didn't exist, and really taking the time to provide the technical assistance that folks needed. And we needed to create the platform in doing that. And so part of it was initially doing the joint venture contract, so we could talk about, how teams could come together. But then that next workshop that we did was literally going through a bid, a legitimate contract. And so what came out of that was we realized that technical assistance was going to be something that had to be part of the overall process. And so we worked closely with OED on literally all the tools and resources that they have. And as contractors come to us, we take them literally. When we were in the building, we walked them right down to Stacey Williams' office down in OED. But we have a great team, and I think it's not just me, it's our entire team, to the boots on the ground, who really want to make these opportunities equitable for folks. And so we hear it all the time that these opportunities don't exist. And so what we do is just dispel a myth. So. But we are working with OED, and that's to that point to continue with programming on TA, but also certification as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted an update. Thank you all. That was it for me, Councilor Bach.
Great, thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone. It's been a very thorough and thoughtful and informative hearing today on sort of complex work and in-depth work that you all do. And just as a continuation of what Councilor Edwards was just asking about, especially around the challenges of homelessness and substance use disorder and mental health, where they sort of all intersect, and I think the last remark there around it being a regional crisis, and the city of Boston is working to support many residents from outside of the city of Boston. We've done the community of origin study, and I know that continues to increase. And we are as a city committed to caring for individuals who come to our city, and certainly we see the impacts on that continuum of care. We see the challenges of that continuum of care because the services it's not a coordinated continuum of care, the challenges of really existing in silos. I'd love to hear a little bit about the community of origin data, where we are today when we think about individuals who are accessing our continuum of care. And I'm really happy to hear that we're looking to invest some of the federal dollars coming in on this effort. I think it's a very wise decision for us to invest those federal dollars, because if we can help individuals, especially the individuals that are experiencing homelessness and substance use disorder, access the system of care and I hope a coordinated continuum of care, we can really make an impact in their lives, and I think relieve some of the burden on our system of care. So community of origin data.
I was going to ask Lila if she wanted to talk about community of origin, and maybe Lila, I would just maybe 30 seconds on some of the work we've been doing with the state recently on discharge planning, because it really does feed into that.
Yep.
So last time that we looked at the data, it's still, as you said, it's still kind of the people who are saying their last permanent zip code, it's more than 50% of people experiencing homelessness are reporting a permanent zip code from outside the city of Boston.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Is that a decline? Because the last number we were at almost 65%, if I recall last year's community of origin data.
Yeah, I couldn't say that it's declined. I would have to, when we pull it from different kind of populations, it comes from different places. I know it's still over 50%. So I don't think we've pulled it during COVID, so we could do that and see if there's been some kind of change based on kind of response to the pandemic. I think Sheila's referring to some work. I mean, the state has made some changes in their shelter policy for single adults, and they have made a rule that shelters are not supposed to be they're not supposed to be excluding people based on their community of origin. We never have in Boston, as you know, but there are many communities that target their shelter to people who have ties to their community, and they're not supposed to do that anymore. So maybe that will help, but I don't know if we've seen much change there. So in addition, we're working on other discharge issues like discharges from hospitals and other institutions to improve that, because there's a huge number of people who are coming out of institutions who end up in shelter, and if there's no shelter available in their community of origin, they may end up in Boston.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what communities were not welcoming non-residents or non-locals into their shelter system. And, it would also be interesting to look at the community of origin data to see which communities have large representations of individuals who are utilizing our services. And again, I want to make it very clear, this isn't about not wanting to take care of people. We need support. We need help, because that continuum of care, our system of care here in the city of Boston is, I think it's more than just a burdened, pressurized system. I think it's very much a broken system of care, and we just need additional resources and additional help to do this work while we're utilizing, I think, those federal resources to find individuals recovery and wellness and supportive housing and all that. So I don't know if anyone could speak a little bit to briefly to some of the federal monies and what we're anticipating to see, and especially when we're thinking about those experiencing homelessness and substance use disorder.
So I guess I'm including the vouchers that just came to BHA in that. And like I said, we are not a sole decision maker in that, but we are advocating that some of those vouchers be targeted to people who are staying outside. And so that would include people who are staying at Mass Cass and who are struggling with substance use disorders. You know, the bulk of our spending in at DND with the federal dollars have been on housing responses and services, and so we don't exactly know what situation people are in, but we know that a lot of the people who are receiving housing and service support from those dollars are struggling with substance use disorders and mental health disabilities. And so the trick is to continue to coordinate with other systems that also have potentially more robust and more robust services and more expertise in those areas. I don't know if that answered your question.
That's great. Thank you, Leila. Thank you, Lila and Sheila, and again, the rest of your team.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Sabi George. Councillor Mejia?
Yes, so I just have two questions. I'm just curious what, if any, efforts are being made for housing for recent graduates, specifically if we can talk, if there's any opportunities for BHA students who are graduating from college. Is there a pipeline to help support them with their housing needs? And I'm also curious about, in Boston, we need to have a Boston jobs residency requirement, but unfortunately we can't afford to live in the city anymore. So we are always struggling to reach our goals here in the city of Boston. And so I'm curious what efforts are being made. And I'm thinking specifically just, not all types of job opportunities, but I'm also thinking about some of our educators as well, and some housing for our educators who are right now can't afford to live in the city that they're teaching in.
So I'm not aware of any program. I mean, if college students, recent college graduates are income qualified, they can get into lotteries. They can, as long as they're no longer full-time students, they can access. It's a little early probably for them to buy a home, but they can access all of our housing programs. But I'm not aware of any.
But those lists are like 8 or 9 years long.
Well, that's the BHA, but our lotteries are happening all the time, and people can. And I do know that some graduates that are working and they don't make a whole lot of money are being successful in our lotteries because I'm dealing with issues related to them. But if there are, we certainly want to retain our students, and we don't want them necessarily, like in my neighborhood, there's 4 or 5 recent college graduates all living in an apartment, and they're taking units out of the family housing inventory. So, there has been, I think the BPTA has been very interested in having developers, although sometimes it's not very popular, developing smaller units, much smaller units, compact units that are less expensive, that recent college graduates that don't want to live with a lot of other students or recent graduates can access. But we don't have a program set up for college graduates.
Yeah, so maybe I think I was looking specifically for BHA students, or maybe I can just follow up with Kate.
Yeah, that's a good idea, especially if they're with their parents.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm more concerned about the BH. I mean, I'm concerned about all college students, but the BHA ones in particular.
Okay. Oh, I see. College students that are graduating out of public housing. Okay, right. We talked a little bit about the family self-sufficiency, and there might be something there for students, but right. Yeah, please follow up with her. If you run into a roadblock, we'll be glad to help.
Absolutely. And then could we just talk a little bit about kind of workforce development housing? I'm thinking about some of our educators in particular who are struggling to stay here in the city, but they're teaching here.
Right. So I will say that we do work with a lot of city employees across the board on our housing programs. There are a lot of city employees in Maureen can, I don't know if we have an exact number, we might be able to get something to you, but we do, we always have a lot of cases because a lot of city employees, they know how to reach out for help because they've learned about the programs, and we are always very, very happy to help them. So with down payment or rent arrearage or housing search, there's sometimes we have, in the city of Boston, we have, employees that are not making a lot of money and that need help finding, a more moderately priced unit. So all of our programs are open to city employees. Maureen, I don't know if you have any, we don't have anything special though for teachers in the city of Boston around homeownership purchases.
We don't have something specifically for them. We do have a lot of BPS employees taking advantage of 1+. There's a nonprofit called Landed that has decided to come into the city of Boston, and they're in Washington and Colorado, and I think California. They are doing a special down payment assistance program, kind of an equity share down payment assistance program for educators. So they have offered their program to BPS employees, and they're about to extend it to city employees as well. So we're working with folks over at City Hall to figure out how to advertise that program. So I believe the Landed program should be on the BPS webpage as a benefit. So we're trying to get that listed on the city employee benefit page as well.
And if I could just add one thing, I know that this year, it wasn't in the deck, but Maureen and I and others have been talking about how do we help folks that want to buy a home, but they have a lot of student debt. And that is, there are some programs being piloted in other cities. And so we really want to explore that. We're working with the Housing iLab on that as well, and Modem, I believe. But we'd love, to circle back with you or anyone on the council that's interested in that, because there's, people want to buy homes. We want them to buy homes, but because they didn't come from wealthy parents, and they had to take out a significant amount of debt to get through college, they now find it very difficult. So we really do want to tackle that problem in the upcoming years.
And Councillor, we did start a home buying club at the Whittier Street Public Housing Development. We will replicate that wherever you want us to, and do like a financial literacy credit component for recent grads. If you want to explore that, we'd love to do that.
Absolutely. And maybe we could take that into the Boston Public Schools. And work with our, seniors, not our, our high school seniors too.
We would love to do that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna reach out to you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. I just have a couple other questions. One is just, Sheila, we were talking about RFP stuff for Faircloth. Are we anywhere on that?
We sure are. We didn't think that you would ask that. Jessica, do you want to give an update on Faircloth?
Sure. So we have been furiously working on it, and the BHA has conducted studies of all of the properties where they believe that there is potential for development. Those studies are completed, and we recently reviewed them, or they're complete enough that we just went through all of them. And simultaneously, we've been looking at using Faircloth for existing property owners to help, tenants that maybe are in a low-income housing tax credit unit, but they're below the 60% threshold, so the rent is a stretch for them, or property owners who have market rate units that are interested in using the fair class opportunity as a way to provide more affordability. So we've been working with the BHA on an RFP for that program, which we think will roll out relatively quickly because it's for existing properties. So DND has been particularly focused on that since we have a lot of the landlord relationships in the private market. And I'm hoping that we'll have a report on that to give to you with some hard dates really, really soon. And then we can look at some of the bigger new development opportunities as well. But it feels like, as it's been very important to you and as you have really championed and pushed, we do want to get the resource out there for existing residents to work on anti-displacement stuff as fast as possible. So that will probably be the first public document that'll go out making the fair class subsidy available, and then followed by some of the new development opportunities.
No, that sounds great. Sounds fantastic. And yes, appreciate following both lanes. And I also had a chance to see some of the BHA stuff and think, there's exciting opportunities there, but we have to do both. And frankly, there's enough, right? When you talk about 2,500 units, there's enough for us to sort of pursue both those fronts. And I would just underscore, definitely interested, along the same lines as Councillor Edwards, in the sort of acquisition opportunities at a bigger scale, and that question of, if it's the BPDA that has to do the swooping in, I think that's fine. I've filed a thing about how we should use their tools more aggressively. As it is, I think it's just a question of what do we need in terms of ready capital to swoop in on those opportunities, and what's the format in which it needs to be held. It would just be helpful to understand. Because it seems to me like that's something where we should actually be able to act as like a large capital holder as the city, and like the federal opportunities. There's a good opportunity with federal funds. We talk about that right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I will add also on that same note, sort of with Faircloth, my team has all been getting sort of trained and up to speed on how it works, so that as larger projects come into us, particularly larger projects that involve preservation of existing units, we've been trying on a case-by-case basis to sort of analyze whether they might be a good way to leverage that resource. And I think now that there's more federal dollars at play, we'll be able to do that even more as we look at opportunities come in. But really excited about working with you all on sort of how to think about acquisitions more broadly.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, and I think obviously, we were already thinking about the kind of Faircloth to RAD pathway, and now HUD has started sort of smoothing that pathway a bit, which is helpful. And which we know makes it a lot more sustainable. So that's great. Sorry, I realize I'm speaking a lot of lingo, but for those watching at home, this is about more deeply affordable units in the city of Boston and using existing federal dollars that we could access to make it happen. Okay, I think I could ask DND questions all day, but I think that probably is what we have for now. Thank you all so much. Again, we have a lot of staff capacity on this call, and I'm grateful to you all, and grateful for the things. If you came and we didn't even ask you about it, we still see the work happening, and we're grateful. All right, and so with that, I'm just Chief Dillon and Will. If either of you wanted to say a closing word, and then I'm going to go to the public testimony that we've had waiting.
No, of course I will. Thank you. And thank you for the partnership over a very, very difficult year. We continue to want to help you and your constituents, so please reach out. I always take a lot of notes in these hearings, and there's some really good ideas that came out today, and that's how it should be, right? We should be exchanging ideas, and you should be letting us know of gaps in what we're doing. So look forward to following up on a lot of what I heard today. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you to all the counselors. Thank you to you, Counselor Bach, for holding this session. And again, if there's anything we can do, any questions you have for us, please feel free to ask me. One thing I will certainly do is once our report is done, I will send it to all the counselors so you guys can see all the work we've been working on. You will see a breakdown of the discrimination report, district to district, council district to council district. So you'll have a full scope of what's actually happening in the city of Boston. And if anyone has any questions or any thoughts, anything that they would like us to do or investigate, please send it my way, and I'll be glad to do it for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. And I'm sorry, this is anticlimactic, but one quick thing, I just remembered, which is, well, one thing would just be, it would be great if we could just get the breakdown of the federal funds to DND, because folks keep asking me about that, and I've sort of seen them all, but I don't actually have that on like a one-pager, so it would be great if we could get that. Because I think as we talk about the overall federal funds, it's helpful for people to know, oh yeah, this much really is going to rental relief and to homeless and things that we know we need to do. So if we could get that from you all, and then does the fact that you're coordinating with the state around advertising mean that we also have kind of looped in with them about their rental relief program and making sure that Bostonians are eligible and such things?
We meet with the state every Monday, although we had to cancel today at 4:30 to go over coordination, any issues. We need a tighter agenda for those meetings, but we do meet with Jennifer Maddock and their A&F and the governor's office every Monday. So if there are issues you're experiencing with RAFT, whatever, get them to us, and then we will get them over to Powers Speak.
Okay, great. No, and I just know that also when we had that hearing in the housing committee, one of the things we were concerned about was that the state make its housing money also available to Bostonians, and that we not end up.
Right. It's all available. Now we know it's all available. We're watching the voucher allocation they received, but I don't know about that yet, but certainly all of the rental relief funding is available to Boston residents.
Great, wonderful. All right, so sorry for the little coda there, but thank you all again. And,
all right.
And now I will take public testimony. So folks who are here to testify, I'm going to be letting you in. I've got Michael Kane. Sorry, I'm trying to get John LaBella over, and then Cassie Hurd. Michael? Michael Kane? Michael, can you hear me? All right, what about, Michael, we'll come back to you if you pick up in a sec. John LaBella?
Sure, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I share my screen, or do you just want numbers and a face, Kenzie?
You can share your screen just if it's, as long as it's, well, what is it?
Oh, it's a, when you see it, I think you'll see it's fine. Can you see that? I'll pass it to you later.
Yes, yes, we can see it. Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, I just have a policy that I don't rebroadcast videos, so that's the only thing. But that's
of course.
Fine.
I'm here in support of the Rental Subsidy Coalition, but also I have a little bit of data from Housing Works. There are three, I think, things that no one knows but us that we want to pass on to you as you talk about the budget for the rental subsidy. Right now, my company's running 5 lotteries this year, and this is the data from one that ended today so far. There are 4,500 people in it. 75% of them are under 40% AMI. There are 9% have vouchers, which means the vast majority of people will only qualify for the low-income units. We're talking then about almost 3,000 people vying for 7 units. This has gotten worse in the last 15 years since we were doing wait lists. So the point of it is nothing we've done yet as a city has really made a dent on the fact that there's not enough legitimately affordable housing. It's a large failure. It's not anybody's particular, but we haven't done it. So I'm part of the Rental Subsidy Coalition. Oh, sorry, one last picture, and I'll send these on. The number of full-time employed but homeless people has been going up long before pandemic. It just got a lot worse last year, but it's been getting worse, period. These are unduplicated counts of maybe 1/8 of the city's non-public housing properties. So I'm sure the actual number is much worse than the 2,000 households that we know of who are full-time employed but homeless. So I think that speaks to the need for this rental voucher program. We are hearing in the meetings with BHA that they might right off the bat have trouble finding enough developers to take advantage of these vouchers. But there are several really important points here that explain that we need to know. These lotteries that are happening now were started a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. It's an incredibly long process. By the time this pilot launched in March or April, really, of this year, it was too late to get any of the lotteries but one that I'm handling. So most of the lotteries running now couldn't really incorporate the rental subsidy thing because it was just too hard getting that fair marketing plan to actually begin the lottery. So I think give this a year or two and we should see more developers. Number two, that fair marketing plan that every developer has to go through with the city, it's 140, 150 pages. It's a gauntlet. It's incredibly complicated. My own questions after reading it were 3 single-space pages. It's really hard. But it is the template. And I think it makes sense that we incorporate into that template this rental subsidy program. The developers should have to say, I'm going to use it or explain why they're not. And I think by putting it in this document, which the developers view as the template, it would make them take that program more seriously. I think the BPDA should also have to incorporate it in their proposals because right now they're just getting anecdotal information from developers who really don't have any methodology behind some of their notes. The last thing is, I don't get a clear-cut sentence from the city in stone that they're going to commit to this program in perpetuity. And I know that's making developers skittish. They don't want to take advantage of it and then find out that they're tied into this horrible yearly renewal or that they're having to evict tenants. So we really need to put it in stone that it is definitely going on in perpetuity. And finally, I think the $5 million is maybe going to be 400 or 500 vouchers. We need 10 million next year. This would be the first program in my 15 years of waitlist management that might actually make a dent in the increase in the homelessness. That one of those comments is for me is Housing Works. I think the rest are rental subsidy coalition points. So thank you very much. I hope I did not talk too fast.
No, thank you so much, John. And I would encourage you to send these slides over to the committee. So that's, if you just send them to ccc.wm@boston.gov, we'd love to put them in the record for everybody. And appreciate that.
Yes. I'm sorry, my headphones went off. Who do I send them to?
No, sure. If you just send it to ccc.wm, stands for City Council Committee on Ways and Means. So ccc.wm@boston.gov.
Thanks a lot. I've given up my screen, and thank you so much.
No, thanks. And yeah, and obviously that huge gap in deeply affordable housing, that's the reason that I'm so focused on getting these 2,500 fair cloth units into circulation, because we need it so badly. All right, I see Michael Kane is up now with a palm tree in the background. So Michael, I'll go to you, and then it'll be Cassie Hurt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor. I was on a Zoom call to somebody in Florida earlier, and I haven't quite come back. But thank you for letting us speak today. I'm from Michael Kane from the Mass Alliance of HUD Tenants and also representing the City Rent Subsidy Coalition that John just spoke from. And we are urging Mayor Janey to increase the allocation that the Mayor Walsh set aside of $5 million a year to at least $10 million a year. There's, given the amount of money that is coming into the city from both the federal, this special allocation from the feds, and the additional new revenue from new growth revenue, we believe the city does have additional room in the budget to increase this program. The city of Washington, D.C. Set the precedent for it. They spend about $50 million a year from the regular city budget. So if they can do it, why can't we, comparably sized city? So we were pleased that the mayor listened to the council and created the $5 million pilot program on a permanent basis. He assured us that it would be $5 million a year, more or less in perpetuity. enabling the city to enter into long-term contracts subject to annual appropriation, just like the federal Section 8 program. Developers are used to that, but they do need some assurance from the city that, yes, it is a permanent commitment, a permanent program. So the pilot is underway. It is, we don't yet know the number of applications and the number of units that are under negotiation for that pilot. The city, the BHA has advertised it in January, and their advertisement is open through, it's a rolling one through June. We don't know how many developers have applied and for how many units. The BHA is hinting that it's not enough to eat up the first allocation of 2.5 million, which is what was advertised. It's soon to go to 5 million annually starting in July 1. So at one level, we do need the council's help in pushing the agencies. We're not clear on how aggressively DND, BHA, and BPDA have been encouraging developers with tax credit units in the pipeline or IDP units in the pipeline to sign up for the steeper subsidy. But the idea was to make mixed income housing with tax credits more affordable to a lower income range by setting aside low-income rent subsidies from the city, just like project-based Section 8, just like project-based MRVP. And these are project-based subsidies, not tenant-based. So they wouldn't be mobile, they would be tied to the units. We prefer to call it a city rent subsidy program, not a city voucher program, because that's a little misleading, I think. So it's more of a city rent subsidy program like the one in Washington. So we need some help in encouraging developers to sign up. We've had mixed records on that of talking to even nonprofits with tax credit applications to encourage them to consider it. Some pushback has been they're worried that because the priority would go to homeless families with children in the Boston Public Schools in this tranche, that they would burden them with families with major problems. We don't think that's really necessarily the case because many of the homeless families with children in the schools are workers. They just can't afford an apartment. They're living on somebody's sofa. So that, and under the city program, they would be eligible, unlike the federal program, for priority in this program. So we're encouraging developers to talk more to the agencies. I think the agencies could be encouraged to do more talking, more outreach around that. So that's the immediate problem, is getting people to sign up. We got this benefit, it's sitting there, it's about to double, right? But people need to sign up. In the long term, though, we need more money. We know the need is there. The Mayor's Housing Report identified 21,000 extremely low-income families that are in need of assistance through 2030. Even with 10 million a year, that's 1,000 units. That's something toward that $21,000 gap, but it isn't enough. They could easily do, if the city did 50 million a year, that's enough for 5,000 low-income families. That would be something. It'd be like what Washington does. So we know that the federal money and the state money are not enough. They need to be increased. So the idea was this program was to increase the amount of money available for extremely low-income people, priority on people that are experiencing homelessness, that are doubling up, this program can assist. I should also mention that because it's a city program, it can be used to assist undocumented families that are not eligible for federal assistance, as you know. So this is it's a city's program. They can target it the way they meet the actual needs of people in the city. So we need the council's help on this. It would be helpful if you all could circulate a letter to Mayor Janey, encouraging her to go for more in this year's budget. Let's get it up to 10 now. And as it expands over time, the developers love it, right? It's money for them. But we need it in the city to meet the need. We need to ratchet up outreach. We need to increase the amount of money. Let's see if we can get the mayor to double the amount annually in this year's budget.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for testifying and for all your work.
Thank you.
Next up is Cassie.
Hey, everybody. I'm Cassie Hurd. I'm a 17-year resident of Alston and the executive director of the Material Aid and Advocacy Program. Like Michael and John, I'm here today representing the City Rent Subsidy Coalition. We have 32 Boston-based organizations who've been advocating for the city rental voucher program since 2016. And so I feel like Michael and John have offered an incredible amount of information, but I can offer some further context around the great need. We know COVID-19 has reaffirmed what unhoused community members have been telling us for years, that congregate shelters are not safe for them. And that also COVID has highlighted the challenges unhoused community members who are surviving poverty in public, seeking services and supporting each other, specifically in the Mass and Cass area, are experiencing every day. We hear frequently from elected and appointed officials noting that we're seeking solutions to this crisis. But frustratingly, we feel like, the administration continues to lean on effective and inhumane policing and public work strategies that are unfortunately criminalizing, marginalizing, and harming community members. Fatal overdose rates increased 42% between 2019 and 2020, and unhoused community members who use drugs are experiencing an escalating HIV outbreak. 13 new cases in January and February of this year alone. And it's been documented that 1 in 8 community members arrested in Boston are experiencing homelessness. And I think we all know that criminalizing poverty, substance use, and mental illness is both counterproductive, but also costly. Medical providers and frontline workers are doing all they can with limited resources available to them. And as Lila noted, in order to be successful, we need to have both housing and substance use services better resourced and working in tandem. And I think, Sheila noted, many people have noted, as we move closer to the end of the eviction moratorium, we know there'll only be more people, households of all configurations facing homelessness. It's been well documented that housing is healthcare. Offering housing first through a $10 million investment in the city rent subsidy program would improve the ability for unhoused community members to access services, improve their health outcomes, and stabilize themselves in a way that they simply can't do surviving on the street, in a shelter, or even if they're precariously housed, doubled up, or living with others. As Michael said, the program's sort of in its infancy, and the BHA is, still working with the RFP, and it hasn't come back yet, but we know it's been highly successful in Washington, and it can be successful here as well. Unhoused and underhoused residents deserve housing, and we can have this, use this critical moment to, stop warehousing unhoused community members in unsafe and inhumane spaces, and really use this program as a form of upstream prevention. So we hope that you'll please include the $10 million. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you to all the members of the coalition. Thank you to my council colleagues for joining, and to those of you who stayed on for public testimony. And again, to the whole DND and Fair Housing team. We really appreciate all your work. And with that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. See you later.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.